Hey guys, I'm back. It's BenTbeyondrepair here. Today we're going to be talking about picking a champion pool. And there's a couple of different things that I want to go through. Like, first, we can talk about different types of champions in the game, different roles, things like that, the basics. And then I want to look at some examples because I think while people, understand, what the different types of champions are in the game, what the roles are, a lot of times players still have a hard time locking in on a champion pool, or what champions they actually want to play. And so, let's use some real examples. Let's take a look at how my champion pool has evolved over the years. And let's take a look maybe at like what some super high ranked players are doing nowadays. And let's take a look at some random op.gg's kind of lower on the ladder. And we should be able to get a sense for what's going on and how important champion pool discipline is. So if we jump right into it, right, if we go to the champions that there are in the game, obviously Riot kind of classifies champions in these different roles that exist. And these aren't perfect classifications, but they're just broad groups. And it's easier for me to talk about, a few broad groups briefly than it is for me to talk about every champion in the game. Obviously, that'd take too long even for me. Assassins are essentially going to look to play this game where you're going to have to give up certain attributes that other champions would have about maybe consistency. Usually they're melee. It depends on the champion, but usually you're giving up a lot of attributes in order to be able to more or less, chunk somebody out in a team fight or one-shot somebody. But you have to get pretty creative with how you're playing because, well, maybe you have some mobility, maybe you have some tools to go in or to escape, and you have a lot of damage. In some cases, depending on the champion, you're either going to need to get a bunch of items and scale before you have the damage to actually do that. And so you really have to understand when your power spikes are at as a champion. Otherwise, you're going to, try to really full commit when you're not strong enough to take somebody out. And you have to get creative with how you're playing, right? Because you're going to have to look for more flanks, look for more opportunities to get in and get around people. You got to be more stealthy. It's better if you can make a play out of vision or unseen. But they're going to lack other things, not necessarily, not every single champion. And of course, a lot of these champions I'm looking at right here, like I don't think Lucian's an assassin. He's obviously a marksman. I don't think he plays really anything like an assassin. So obviously there's some categorization problems that maybe Riot has going on. But in general, assassins will usually, at least in the beginning of the game, they can tend to lack wave clear. So if we look at some of these champions like Fizz, like Kha'Zix, although I guess, if they lack wave clear, they're more likely to be put in jungle. Let's think of some traditional assassin champions. I mean, Akali's wave clear is okay, but it's kind of medium. It's decent. LeBlanc's a pretty traditional assassin. Her wave clear isn't very good. So there's some definite trade-offs here with playing an assassin champion, but usually you're looking to do a lot of damage and you're not looking to do sustained damage. You're looking to be creative and burst somebody out in a fight. And so it's going to require, target selection, prioritization, things like that. Fighters are going to give you kind of a similar feel, like you're trying to get on top of somebody. Usually you're a melee champion as a fighter. But a fighter is kind of equivalent to a bruiser. So usually you're going to have a mix of AP and health or a mix of AD and health. And so you're going to be more like a bruiser. And this can be good if rather than, just jumping in and trying to assassinate somebody with a really sick combo where you have to kind of, use all your abilities perfectly, make sure you don't miss things, get creative with your approach. A fighter is a little bit more straightforward in that you're going to be able to just trade your HP as a kind of half tanky champion. You're going to be able to trade your HP to just kind of run at somebody and run them down. But, so a fighter is maybe looking for more longer sustained fights. And it would be more interesting to play, I think, the less aggressive of a player you are, the more tanky you want to be, right? If you want to rely on strategy more rather than your champion's mechanics, then the better it is for you to be tankier. In general, I think tank champions are just much easier to play. And of course, especially for newer players, having tankiness and being able to play the game more slowly, more consistently, not just dying outright from one bad trade, but having a little bit more survivability. I think, fighters make a lot more sense, or even tanks. And then let's see, we've got like mages. I mean, a lot of these are supports right here. So if we're talking about like mages that are mostly being played as carries in like mid lane, obviously like they're going to have really good wave clear. They're going to like be able to poke out their opponent and control them rather than bursting them. So they're looking, if you're a technical player who likes to slowly chip away at your opponent over time with trading, if you feel like your spacing is really good, like you're keeping proper distance from the opponent in lane, you want to learn how to weave in auto attacks and spells well without getting punished for it. Like a mage is the ultimate champion to learn how to have good trading patterns. But the thing about a mage is that you're usually not going to do consistent damage in a fight like an AD carry would, because a mage is going to send out a burst of spells, do a little bit of damage, and then a lot of their stuff's going to go on cooldown. So for most mages, they're not going to have consistent damage throughout a fight. And a lot of times, but depending on the champion, they can also be very immobile. So if you think of champions like Xerath here, for example, like Lux, very squishy, immobile champions. So your positioning is also paramount. So even though you don't do, consistent DPS like an AD carry, it's very important that you only dip in close to a fight when you have all your spells up, and then kind of sit back and back up a little bit when your spells go on cooldown, so that you're contributing to the fight without putting yourself at too much risk. We've got a lot of enchanters here, so I don't know if it's split that up into a separate category at some point if we keep going down or what. Obviously, we've got like marksmen, like AD carries, and like we've talked about, I really think that there's kind of two types of AD carries. You have like caster AD carries that are going to rely more on using their abilities and maybe be a little bit more lane dominant, usually a little bit better early. And then you have auto attack reliant AD carries that are going to be going like crit or on hit, and mostly relying on their auto attacks. And they have a couple of abilities for maybe a little bit of utility or to stay alive, or, as some kind of, self buff or passive for their attacks. But marksman, if you want to deal constant DPS, you want to be person on your team who's doing some of the most damage out of any champion. A lot of mages can do the most damage though, so not necessarily the role that's going to do the most damage. A lot of burst mages, a lot of AoE mage champions, Karthus, Brand, things like that are obviously going to do more damage than a lot of ADCs. But if you like auto attacking a lot and you want to prioritize farming and playing for the late game, getting a lot of gold, kind of being a safe passive player who can analyze threats, then AD carry is a good role for you. But yeah, you get a lot of conflict, right? Like I think a lot of AD carry players go into the role wanting to be that carry of the team, wanting to do a lot of damage and be that main source of damage and carrying from the team. But then the issue is that AD carry has become less and less of an impactful role over the years. Now, that's not to say AD carry champions aren't really impactful, but you're seeing them be, the champions themselves are actually quite strong right now, and the items are quite decent as well. But you're seeing them being picked in mid lane and in top lane, because in mid lane and in top lane they get levels, and in mid lane they're actually in a safer lane for themselves. They don't have to rely on a support, and actually supports have found that kind of the best way to play support isn't just to babysit your AD carry, but to be a champion that is unique in that it's free from having to rely on XP. So supports have found that because XP doesn't really matter for support champions, that they can just start roaming all over the map and having a huge impact on the game. And so because of that, I mean, if an AD carry is basically going to be playing by themselves anyways, why not stick them in mid lane? where they have a safer, shorter lane where they're less likely to get ganked and killed, where they get more XP and more levels. And while AD carries are very gold reliant, XP can be great for AD carries too. A lot of AD carry champions, benefit a lot from the levels. I mean, you get more AD and attack speed per level, and you get more defensive stats. Like you're obviously going to get like more armor and more health and stuff like that. And just being safer in a safer lane, a safer role in general, you're going to get access essentially to, I would say, more resources. So you're seeing AD carries being propped up in other roles, but the reality is that whereas AD carry in early seasons used to be one of the most impactful roles, kind of like the carry or the quarterback of League, AD carry is not really like that anymore. It's a role about surviving and baiting out abilities, and just trying to farm up and play for, like a three item power spike or something like that in a lot of cases, depending on the champion, of course. But for most ADCs, especially, we're talking about like traditional auto attack reliant ADCs, it's that 3 item power spike. And, that's going to take a long time to get to. So the reality is that roles like jungle that can impact the entire map, and that can farm quite efficiently without really taking significant damage from their camps, without really having to trade off between ganking or farming. Like if you're really efficient as a jungler, of course in low elo, like people aren't going to be efficient at farming. It's going to feel like a trade-off if you're spam ganking all the time, like you're falling behind in CS. But a lot of really good junglers, like we've talked about before, are able to just kind of perma farm, and they'll gank, just wherever they're near, once they finish their camps. Or, they'll get halfway through a camp, and obviously like a good jungler, if they identify that the situation, like the timing window is closing, will like get off their camp and go gank. But for the most part, they're just, able to clear pretty efficiently and then find ganks and find kills and assists in between their clear. And so they're having way more impact all over the map. They're having the most impact early game, which is really important in a role or a game that's become shorter than it used to be, where items are pretty expensive. So obviously I think that AD carries take maybe a little bit too long to get online for bot lane, and that's kind of hurt them. But that's not to say that, the role isn't strong or the champions aren't strong. And then same thing with support, right? Since support players play very impactful play style, I think that supports are able to have kind of a crazy impact on games. And, Riot said as much, that the difference between, when you have an auto-filled jungler or an auto-filled support, that those are the two roles that are really having the biggest impact on you winning or losing games. And so those are kind of issues that they're focused on targeting too when they match teams together, because they've noticed that those are kind of problematic roles when it comes to impacting the outcome. So I think that you have to understand that if you're signing up to play AD carry nowadays, you're not really signing up to be like the main damage dealer of your team, or unless you go really late game. And it's, quite a mechanically demanding role, whereas you play a role like jungle and you're going to get lots of resources. There's similar champions to Marksman, like Kindred and Graves and things that you can play even in the jungle if you really like the ranged auto attack style. But you're going to be more of a carry, in the sense that you're going to be able to have a bigger impact on the outcome of your games if you're playing a role like that. Let's see what else they've got. And then support, like I said, okay, so here it has just listed all supports together. You've got a lot of different support champions. I really throw them into 3 camps, like engaged kind of tank, usually tank engaged supports, enchanters, and poke supports, or really more like mages being played in support. And if you're, playing a tank engaged support, the thing is you're going to have the best ability to roam most of the time. Again, it depends a little bit on the champion, but you're going to have really strong ability to roam because you're going to have a lot of utility, a lot of CC. And if you're playing an enchanter, you're going to scale really well and be able to synergize really well with your AD carry, keeping them alive and buffing them up. But you're not going to be able to roam necessarily as well because you don't have as much utility when you roam, as much CC. So if you roam and heal somebody up, that can be okay, but it's not really ideal or the best, right? For roaming. So enchanters need to kind of, like poke support champions, kind of dominate the lane. Otherwise, they're going to be in a really tough spot. But they're also squishy and vulnerable. So, but they do scale very well as supports can scale. And they bring an awful lot of healing and shielding to the game right now. Obviously, their items are very strong. So one of the big things, and that makes sense because they're supposed to be better at scaling. But I would definitely say that tank support items are much weaker than enchanter items. And so one of the areas that they get to benefit from is once they start completing, item 1, item 2, item 3, their advantage over a tank support is going to become, pretty big. And then poke supports, like if you're playing like a mage kind of just in support, you're mostly looking to pick a champion that's just going to provide a lot of extra damage for your team in a role that's not really focused down as much. And, surprisingly, it works because supports actually get so much free income from everywhere, from their support item, giving them, a bunch of extra gold, to it upgrading and essentially giving you like an item for free, essentially. And then, gaining access to a lot of gold from assists and stuff like that. They really do get access to quite a bit more gold than you would expect. And so, with 1 or 2 mage items on the correct champion, on a Brand, on a Xerath, on a even like APMF support, if you have these type of champions being played in support, but they're just getting to like get an item or 2 for free, then it's kind of like almost a free way to get an extra damage dealer on your team. And while it's important to have utility or the healing and shielding in some games, for sure that can be better, especially in lower ranks where you're just kind of looking to carry through your own games. Playing a more independent damage reliant support can be a better way to carry games, but I don't necessarily think that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to learn the role. So, these are kind of the types of champions that exist in the game, briefly. And then I guess they've got tanks listed here. Obviously tanks can be played in support. They could be played in top lane. They could be played in jungle, can kind of be played all over the place. But obviously, like I said before, tanks, come with a lot of CC. If you like really big team fight ultimates, if you like getting in the middle of fights and, and kind of like losing lane gracefully, recognizing that maybe lane isn't your strongest, area as a player, but that you want to be like a team player, that you're better at moving around the map, that you're better at engaging fights and paying attention to where people are, that, you want to be a chunky boy, then being a tank is a good way to go, because it's obviously going to give you the ability to kind of go behind a little bit and work with less gold and less XP, but still be really impactful in your games regardless, because a lot of people aren't willing to play tanks for their team, but it's, obviously an important, necessary role, that you can have on your team to build a good team comp. So really we want to think about like what different types of players there are. Why do you enjoy playing League? Do you just enjoy, CSing a lot? Maybe you should be playing like a mage with really good wave clear, or maybe you should be playing AD carry. Do you enjoy doing more damage than anybody else? Then maybe you should be playing like a mage, with a lot of AoE damage, or maybe you should be playing AD carry and like a hyper carry, AD carry, and getting a lot of DPS in and learning how to position properly and actually deal damage properly. If you're somebody who wants to just stomp lane really, really hard, you're just someone who wants to win lane, you want to pick a really lane dominant champion, then maybe you should pick like a fighter that is strong early and can kind of dominate in top lane or in mid lane, or a caster AD carry if you want to play AD carry. If you're playing support and you just want to dominate lane, you pick an engaged support with a lot of CC and you fight and you fight and you fight. But you also want to recognize, like I've said before, that your AD carry isn't necessarily going to want to do that either, depending on what type they are. A lot of times they're going to want to farm up and wait for their item power spikes. So if you're just constantly fighting, especially if you aren't that proficient at it, you're learning, you're losing a lot of fights. It's not going to be super fun for your AD carry, but it kind of is what it is. And then if you want to, there's a lot of fighters or bruisers that kind of scale well into the late game. So if you're the type of person who maybe doesn't feel as comfortable winning lane, or you don't want to focus on winning lane, you want to win through kind of just doing your best to mitigate your losses in the lane, but then your champion automatically becomes stronger than everybody later into the game. Some people just really enjoy the playing those scaling champions, and that could be, there's scaling champions in all kinds of different roles, right? You could play an enchanter that scales really well, like Soraka in support, if other aspects of support are calling to you. You could play Smolder, or obviously Smolder's built with a scaling mechanic that's very obvious like that, but there's lots of hyper carry AD carries, Jinx, Kog'Maw, Twitch, that become much stronger later into the game. If you're playing top lane, you can play champions that become much better late game, like even a Jax or a Gangplank or something like that scales well. If you're playing mid lane, there's scaling champions like Aurelion Sol. So they've put a lot of these champions into almost every role in the game that fit some of these different categories. And so for the most part, though, we all know that the reality is that it's not easy to find your main champion. And sometimes it's going to change, especially as the game changes and the champions change as well. Things are going to change, and your main champion may not always stay the same. So it's going to require, you to kind of be interested in maybe 10 or 20 champions and try playing them for a few games and seeing how it goes and seeing if you like the feel of the champion. There's plenty of champions, like I enjoy playing tank engage supports and stuff like that, but there's plenty of tank engage supports that for whatever reason, I just don't like the kit for whatever reason. It just doesn't feel the same as playing some of the other ones or whatever, and it's kind of hard to describe, but just from having played them a couple of times and having played the other champions a bunch, I feel more comfortable playing one type of engage support or certain characters versus others. And, that's obviously totally fine. So you're just going to have to do some experimenting at the end of the day in order to find out. But I do want to give you obviously some guidance and look at some examples of, what people have done, what I've done and stuff like that. So let's just take a look here. So we've kind of got a general idea of like what the different types of champions are in the game. And what category a lot of these champions are falling into here and stuff like that. And so you might get a list off of, just hitting this tab and going through the champions that there are in the game. You might get a list of, champions that you think you might be interested in, right? I even still have this to this day, even though I very clearly, love playing Braum and just main that champion. I still have champions that I'm kind of interested in trying, especially like other Warden supports that are similar to Braum. I want to play a little bit more Taric. I want to play a little bit of Shen support, a little bit of Poppy support, and kind of see how those things go. But obviously, if I'm trying to do my best to climb, I'm not necessarily going to have time to go do that. Or if I'm going to do that, I'm probably not going to do that in solo queue on my main account, right? So it's a bit of a trial and error process. But let's take a look at some players, right? So if we go to, let's just go to op.gg really quickly, and we'll take a look at some examples. So if we go to leaderboards on op.gg, we can take a look at, let's just take a look at the top 10 solo queue players in NA and kind of look at how their op.gg is distributed and what their champion pool is like. So we can see White Space here, rank 1, obviously very good top laner, actually especially good at playing a wide variety of champions, and being able to play a lot of counter pick matchups and stuff like that. But, we can see that when it comes to solo queue, well, he actually has a pretty wide champion pool, I'd say, compared to a lot of people that we see in solo queue. We can see that he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 champions that he's played a decent amount, and then a really big fall off here to Gwen. So he's got 20 or more games played, on 6 different champions, but then only 6 games played on Gwen. And this is a guy who's got a pretty sizable champion pool. Another thing to keep in mind, I guess, would be, if we look at how many champions, he is actually playing a lot of unique champions in the last 20 games, even more so than I would say this is representative of. But basically, we can see, and I'm assuming Samira is probably being played in AD carry. It doesn't look like he would be playing that top. So, that is interesting, right? So he is playing primarily top lane. I do believe his Twisted Fate is in top lane. Let's see if we can find some. Yeah, his Twisted Fate is like AD Twisted Fate top lane. So the guy's got 5 top lane champions that he plays. And we could call it, oops, the camera's in the way. We'll move out of the way here. We can call it 6 champions if you include his Samira, right? Which he's playing when he gets filled to AD carry or gets secondary role, let's say AD carry. So obviously this is a player with a pretty deep champion pool. But really most of his games really just on 2 champions, right? On Camille and Vayne at about 70 games each, and then a drop off to 30. And he's got about 30 games on TF, on Jax, and on Kennen, and then about 20 games when he's playing AD carry second. So obviously this is a player who feels comfortable enough to actually play games out on his secondary role, which I think is a interesting topic. We'll probably talk about this separately, but I think being able to play a secondary role is going to become an asset, because Riot just announced in the last patch notes that if you get your secondary role, and I don't think they've rolled this out yet, I think they delayed it to the next patch, but very soon, starting on the next patch, if you get your secondary role, it's going to match make against the other team as if you were autofilled. So it's going to try to provide at least somebody else on the other team who is also getting their secondary role or who is basically autofilled. What that means is that if you're capable of playing 2 roles basically at the same level, that would be a huge advantage to you, because if you're able to play that second role at your main level, then if you play those games out, you're actually going to have an easier time winning them, even if you're slightly worse at your second role, because you're going to be more likely to be playing against autofilled players or other players who are playing secondary who aren't able to play their secondary role nearly as well as their first. So interesting change that I think it actually does make it better than previously to not just say that I should dodge every single time, I get a secondary role. If I can play a secondary role to a similar level to my main or slightly worse than my main, it can be worth it once they implement this to learn a secondary role up to the level of your main, or to if you're already there with the secondary role to do that. But of course, I would caution against this. This is a very good player, so if you aren't capable of doing that, if you're not only a couple win percent lower on your secondary role, then probably you should still be not playing when you get secondary role or autofill. But we can see really only 6 champions, right? And we'll move on. Okay, this guy's actually got a pretty deep champion pool too, it looks like. So this guy's got 39 games played on his main champion, and then 20 on his 7th most played champion. Let's see if we can take a look here at the champions tab. And then Camille, which is number 8, he's got 18 games on as well. So not terrible. Really quite a deep champion pool as well, I would say, to be honest, to be fair. Part of the thing that you're seeing here, though, too, as well, especially for like the top of Challenger, is players are trying to prove in solo queue that they have a big champion pool. And so just because they are now expanding their champion pool, and we actually saw this, we can see this both with this player and with Whitespace or Surdy, is that Whitespace obviously or other players, I'm not necessarily saying him, but it looks like they're playing a wider distribution of champions in their last 20. Like you can see both of these players in their last 20 ranked games. This is expanded last 40, but in their last 20 ranked games, this Surdy's got no more than 4 games played on any given champion. And this guy who's ranked 2 has no more than 2 games on any given champion. And I think that might be representative of people trying to show that they have a good champion pool. Whereas I don't think that it's necessarily optimal climbing strategy to be playing, a different champion every game like this. But obviously these players are certainly capable of kind of doing that. Okay, so here we've got a support player. And he is primarily playing Nautilus, with 110 games played, and then a huge drop off to his second most played champion, Rel and Leona. He's got about 60 games played on each. And then a big drop off again to 37 games on Bard and Alistar. And then again, a bit of a 15 game drop off to some of these other champions. And we can kind of see, right, that like his Nico's not doing very well. But I mean, maybe that's a unique champion he's trying to learn. Yeah, some of his other support champions are actually pretty decent here as well, even going down the list with a decent amount of games played. This guy, this Echo player, obviously, like he's doing okay on some other champions, but this player is almost an Echo one trick, to be honest, right? Like he's got a really good Jarvan secondary in the jungle. It looks like he's playing Echo jungle, so he's got a really good Jarvan as a second pick, but then he's dropping off from 276 games on Echo, 63 on Jarvan, to 12 games with a 42% win rate on Kha'Zix, and then playing other roles when he's filled, like support on Thresh with the 4 games played and went 1 and 3. So obviously, like this player is mostly just playing 2 champions. We got Tree Frog over here. This guy is he playing AD carry? It looks like he's playing mid lane. AD carries mid lane. So it looks like he's playing AD carries mid lane, and he has a really good win rate on Lucian and Ezreal with 56 games and 40 games played. And then he plays Yone with 33 games. So we're kind of slowly dropping off here. And then we get into like Lee Sin, which I guess he's playing when he plays jungle secondary probably. Maybe it's mid. No, here it's jungle. So I'm assuming he's playing this jungle, and then he's, not winning very much with that negative win rate. He's got decent stats actually on LeBlanc, back down at 20 games played, and then not so good on Azir, etc. So this guy, I would really say if we're looking at this guy's OP.GG, he's really proficient on these 3 champions. And then we kind of start to fall off, especially as we get into like playing other roles like Lee Sin and jungle and stuff like that. Here we've got this player looks extremely proficient, but again, it's a little bit deceptive because such few games played. A lot of people, to be honest, right, they're not playing on their main account. Like obviously this is a Smurf account. They got D2 in the first split, and now they're Challenger 1500 LP. Their most played champion is 27 games. Now they have a pretty wide pool of champions here for sure. But again, part of the problem here is that if this person went unranked to Challenger, and to be fair, like they were Diamond 2 in the first split, so since this reset, all of these stats were like D2 plus and probably high MMR, so maybe Masters plus stats. But a lot of these were not the person originally getting to Challenger for the first time. So what I'm telling you is that, and maybe looking at the top 10 wasn't the best example, because maybe these players are like the most proficient solo queue players who are able to play more than a couple of champions. My experience with the latter has been that the most successful solo queue players, especially getting to the top for the first time, are really playing about 3 champions in their champion pool. The problem with playing 1 champion is that you'll get target banned, especially as you get higher up. If your champion gets banned, you're basically forced to dodge or have a much lower chance at winning. and you're able to cover different scenarios by just having a few champions. So by having 2 or 3 champions, you can cover whether you're blind picking or if you're counter picking. You can play different types of champions that might fit into different team comps well. So you might have one engage support you can play, one enchanter you can play, or something like that. And one champion that you can blind pick and stuff like that. And that's going to give you a lot of flexibility, the same flexibility almost as if you were playing 10 champions, but it's going to give it to you while only having to be proficient at 2 or 3 champions. And so especially for a newer player or a player who's lower ranked who's trying to learn the game, focusing on one champion and then expanding your champion pool like these people are doing is a better way to approach ranking up and climbing and getting better at the game, rather than trying to play 10 different champions all at once. This is the other thing too. I mean, we haven't been looking for this a ton. I actually haven't seen this. So again, it looks like these people are playing almost a different champion every game, which I think is really unique and not something that we normally see. So like this person, for example, is definitely experiencing that or doing that. They're like very much picking based on what's going on in the game. And so they have, like some of these other accounts we pointed out, no more than 3 games on the same champion. I don't think that would be good for a lower rank or a new player to do, but we'll keep going through. Okay, so this guy's essentially like a Riven one trick. I mean, he's not, right? It's unfair to call him a Riven one trick because obviously he's got like a good win rate here on Vayne as well, pretty good stats, decent on Kai'Sa as well. I wonder, he's not playing Kai'Sa top lane, is he? I assume that he'd be playing it in 80 carry. What's Viper? Yeah, he's playing it 80 carry twice top lane, although this got remade. We don't have any more. Oh, let's see. Maybe we can't see. 80 carry, 80 carry. Yeah, so it's probably mostly 80 carry here. He played it mid, top. Actually, it's quite a mix. But yeah, I mean, so it looks like Viper is mostly playing Riven, right? And then he's playing a little bit of Vayne top probably, and then a mix of Kai'Sa all over the place. And then we're falling off to if you've got less than 20 or so games played, kind of regardless of the stats, like I've said before, I mean, it can be quite impressive if you're a challenger player, but really less than 20 games played, I kind of disregard. Even from my experience scouting players, I really feel like if a player's got less than 20 solo queue games, and you really have to get into the nitty gritty of it, right? Like, especially if the account, and that's not the case with this account, and obviously like this is, professional player or whatever, but some of these accounts, like the one that we saw, this only has 2 splits of ranked history. This only has, 1 previous split of ranked history. A lot of these accounts, you have to understand that they're able to acquire, especially if they're first time in high rank on the account. They're able to acquire a high win rate in a way that's almost meant to deceive scouts. But they'll take a new account, and let's say you want to get into the LCS, right? You're going to take a new account, and you're going to win a bunch of games on a bunch of different support champions in silver, in gold, in platinum, and emerald. You're going to blow up your stats, right? And then you're going to start playing 1 or 2 champions that you're actually proficient at a high level, and using those champions to get your account to your peak. And it makes it look like on your op.gg, this is an incredible player who's able to play, and some of these players are, but it makes you look like you're an incredible player who's able to play like 30 games on 10, 20 different champions. And some people can legitimately do that and some people can't. And so it's an attempt to get into a tryout by making your champion pool, fluffing your champion pool up. And so I'm always very deceptive of these newer accounts. Excuse me. So where were we here? So we're going through some of these, Viper's mostly just playing Riven on this account, a little bit of Vayne secondary, and then we're sort of getting into filled and not very many games territory. Pretty decent champion pool here on this guy too. Sushi. So Ezreal, Kog'Maw, Jinx, Kai'Sa, Jhin. Pretty decent number of games played, and then we're getting into like playing support. So he's got like 6 champions as well that he's been working on, and in his last, are these like shifting based on the meta, or these like from a long time ago, or what? I mean, he's got 5 games out of 20 on Ezreal in his last 20, so I would say that that's pretty in line, or maybe even a little bit more focused on a smaller pool of champions than before, but pretty wide array of champion picks here. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, is sometimes even a player who's not trying to like take a new account and deceive people or anything like that, they'll play in a certain meta, and all of a sudden the beginning of the season, Rakan's super good, they put 20-30 games into Rakan. They're good at playing Rakan because they have a lot of recency of experience playing the champion. Then all of a sudden the meta shifts, and now that player is playing 20-30 games on on Leona Nautilus, and then those champions start to fall off a bit, and they switch to different champions. And because they were playing those champions in a certain meta dependency, their skill level overall on those champions, compared to a player, if you were comparing stats and win rate and stuff like that, of a similar high elo player but who's playing in a meta where that champion's not actually that strong, it can kind of be deceptive in night and day, right? And if the person hasn't played the champion since the start of the split, or they played 30 games at the start of the split and never played it again, how capable are they of hopping into a scrim at a high level, or a game at a high level, and instantly picking up the champion again? It can be difficult. They might need to unrust first, at least. Okay, so we've got like this guy. Weird champion pool on this guy. We see like a lot of LeBlanc mostly, but it looks like support. We're seeing like Bard, Poppy, Alistar, Rakan. So where is the LeBlanc being played? Was that mid, or is that some like support LeBlanc? Let's take a look. This game was support. Okay, so he's interestingly enough kind of off meta support LeBlanc player. But then again, like not a lot of games played. Again, you can see it's a new account. It was Emerald last split, and then to Challenger this split. So not a lot of ranked history. I mean, if we look at a lot of these accounts, Season 9, 2 splits of history, 2 splits of history. Season 12, we've got 3 splits of history here, 2 splits of history. Viper's account, is this Viper? Yeah, Viper's account is very old, since Season 6. He's the oldest one there. Okay, here we've got a guy who started in Silver in Season 4. So we've got like 2 normal actual main accounts here. This one, 2 splits of history, and then Doklas since Season 11, I guess. Looks like he's playing a lot of Varus top. Varus top, Jace, Rumble, and then we kind of start to fall off a little bit. Maybe he's just practicing Renekton, or maybe it's just been a little bit unfortunate on these games. I mean, he's close to a 50% win rate on the Renekton, so maybe if he played a little bit more, it'd be a 50%. And his Camille and Jax are obviously pretty decent as well. So, I mean, he's doing well on a pretty wide variety of champions as well. And then that's the other thing to keep in mind too, is if you've got like these professional players like Dokla and stuff like that, you're kind of going to expect them to focus on playing many different champions for practice. I don't know that he should be practicing Varus top so much, but who knows? Maybe we'll see it in the LCS. Okay, so that's kind of an example of a lot of top 10 players. I actually think that maybe it wasn't the best example. My experience with most high elo players, let's say Master Plus, is that the percentage of games on their top 3 champions is going to be well over 50, 60, 70% of the games on the account that split. And that kind of distribution leads to a lot of success. While that's what you would expect when someone's climbing to Challenger for the first time or to GM or Masters for the first time. Obviously, players who are trying to get onto a team and show that they have a wide champion pool, or who are already on a team and just using solo queue as a practice environment for for learning how to play a wider pool of champions or practicing certain picks they might want to bring out. Obviously, those players are going to intentionally have more picks on second, third, fourth, fifth champions than you would expect, or that might be optimal in solo queue. But obviously, for a newer player, probably better to focus on fewer champions. So let's take a look at my op.gg kind of throughout the years. So obviously, right now, it's pretty heavily just a Braum situation going on. So doing pretty well on the Braum. And then big fall off here, like harder than these other ones. So like compared to these top 10 players, like my champion pool, this split is probably representative of a very small champion pool compared to those players. That being said, we go back, we can even look at solo queue. So let's take a look at like last split, for example. When I was playing last split, you can see that obviously huge percentage of my games on Braum, but still 60 plus games on Nami, almost 70 games on Nami, something like 23 games on, or this is 33 games on Nautilus, 22 games on Maokai, 22 games on Lulu, 20 games on Rakan. So you can see that even for a player like me, who is like on my main account, not on a new account where I'm able to have a high win rate by playing these champions through silver or through lower ranks, I'm still able, in last split to play, 6-7 different champions, kind of proficiently at that rank in solo queue. Sona was not doing so well with that champion. Morgana went 7-4, but that's, not a ton of games played. So we can see that, like, I'm obviously, as a long-term player who's been playing the game for a long time, of course I'm capable of pulling out 6 or 7 champions, but do I think that it's the best strategy for climbing, especially for a newer player who probably doesn't have 6 or 7 champions they can pull out? No, probably not the best idea. So, we can keep going back. Let's start back at the beginning. So season 3, and this will give you an idea too, because I think it's important to understand a lot of these accounts we're looking at in high elo, people don't understand, like, these people just like me played thousands of games, just like Tyler, Tyler 1 and stuff like that, who's known for having played a bajillion games. It's because people see that he's played a bajillion games, right? And maybe he does play a lot of games, but the reality is that it takes a lot of games to get proficient at the game, especially if you're not used to PC games, if you're not used to MOBAs. So let's kind of look at my ranked history over the seasons and see how my champion pools evolved, right? And how I was doing over that time. So we can see that when I first started out, 44 unique champions, probably across many different roles. And I'm sitting here winning 57% of my games on Leona support in bronze, place bronze 3. So I'm winning 57% of my games in Leona in like bronze and silver, 52% of my games on a decent number of games on Sona, like 50 something games on Nami with a 54% win rate, nearly 50 games on Tark with a 53% win rate. So really I've got a pool of like these 4 champions that I'm doing quite well with, but obviously I'm doing so much better with Leona than any other champion. Why not just focus on playing the Leona? For example, right? I would have obviously climbed a lot faster and I would have gotten better quicker if I had just focused on playing the one champion. But actually, this was not as terrible as it could have been, because really I was limited to about 4 champions here-ish. And then we start to get into like, okay, now I'm playing Jarvan in like jungle. So this is like, obviously role selection wasn't a thing in season 3, but we're getting into like fill territory where, like, realistically nowadays, knowing what I know now, I would have never played these Jarvan games. I would have just dodged these 30 games or whatever, and gotten the opportunity to not lose 6 more than I won, and not lost a whole division off of playing Jarvan, and learned basically nothing from playing like just like 30 games of jungle in bronze. Instead I would have gotten to learn by playing an extra 30 games on Leona. That obviously that would have been a better use of time. Blitzcrank went 10 and 10 on 50%. Thresh, pretty difficult champion to play. Definitely did not do well on that champion. And then we're getting into like some top lane, some mid lane fill picks, some top lane fill picks and stuff like that. And then this is, I think, a real killer, right? So like there's kind of a couple of different components here. If you break this down, like you just see like 44 different champions, but let's break this down into some kind of understandable sections when you're looking at your own op.gg and you're trying to build a champion pool. Really, I have 4 champions here that I was having success on, and I was having so much more success on one of them than even these other ones that I'm averaging like a 53% win rate on, that I'd be much better off just sticking to playing Leona. If I really want to have a little bit more of a diverse champion pool or some different options, maybe I stick with a champion pool of 4 champions here. But there's no reason to be playing a role that I'm not actually attempting to learn for so many games just to lose rank. It's just a complete waste of time. And I don't need additional support champions that I'm putting 20 games on when I've already got 4 different support champions here, 2 tanks, 2 enchanters, right? I've got a decent champion pool going on here with a lot of different options that I'm performing well on. No reason to spread myself thin and try to play a 6th or a 7th different support champion, 2 also very high skill cap, mechanically demanding champions, especially compared to these other champions that I'm playing. Only to do bad on them and also lose rank, right? And then we've got like top lane, same thing as the Jarvan. There's just no reason to play these games. Then we've got like Annie mid, same thing as the top lane or the jungle. Like when I'm getting filled into those roles, when I'm not getting a lobby where I'm getting support, there's just no reason to play those games out instead of dodging. Then we've got like Shen, top lane is the same thing as the Jax. And so now we start to get into this territory of like, okay, don't waste your time when you're filled. Just dodge and focus on learning your main role. Focus on sticking to your main pool of champions, because you're going to wipe away a lot of progress, right? Like I played 50 games, 55 games, 57 games, it looks like on Nami, right? That's a lot of time. And all I got out of that time was I got a little bit better at Nami and I won 5 more games than I lost. But I wiped those 5 more games than I lost away instantly by playing these 30 games on Jarvan, only to spend an additional 30 hours playing and learning Jarvan for a role in a champion that I would just go on to abandon and never really play again because I didn't want to play jungle. And these were lobbies back then where you called out your role and you had pick order, and I just didn't get support in these games. But I just shouldn't have played them out, obviously. And same thing nowadays, if you were to get auto-filled or to get secondary role and get something like this, no point wasting 30 hours of your precious time trying to learn a role you're not intending to learn, because it's only going to tank you. And now all the time that I put into Nami and all the time that I put into Jarvan is essentially kind of wasted, except for getting a little bit better at Nami and a little bit better at Jarvan. But I'm not going to do anything even now with having gotten better at Jarvan, and I'm not really going to do much even with getting better at Nami. So then if we can continue down, right, we've obviously got, so I would classify like these Jarvan games, Jax games, Annie games, and Shen games as like, I'm getting filled and I shouldn't be wasting my time doing that. I'm just losing all these, these huge gains I'm getting from playing these main 4 champions. I'm just throwing those gains away by playing games when I'm filled. Then we've got like more learning, like with Blitzcrank, Thresh, Janna, I'm putting 10-ish games, right? There's a lot of champions like this where people will put like 10 games or so. They're not quite getting to like 20 plus games where they've actually like learned the champion and they're able to get towards a 50% win rate if they're learning it for the first time. They're just very likely to be sitting in a negative win rate category. So that's an issue. Or you have champions that we'll start to get into here, like let's say starting here with like Master Yi, where you've got like 3 games or less on the champion, and you're just taking a lot of little losses over time. So for example, we've got -9 games here, then 1-1 on Twitch, so that puts us at 1-10 down here. Then we've got another -4, so that's 1-14. Then we add up these 5 one-off wins on these champions. That puts us at 6-14. and then 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So we went like 6 and 22, between pick 26 and pick 24. We went 1 and what was it, 6 and 22? That's terrible, right? Like why do that to yourself? Why throw away the time that you've spent learning and getting better at the game and gaining rank? Why do that? And you'll see so many players, right? So even if we go back to these players who have really massive champion pools, 23 games played, right? We'll start to see this if we look over. Oh my God, this guy's actually got 50 games played. That's nuts. Is that solo queue though? Probably. I assume the guy's not playing flex. Yeah. 50 games, 23. This guy's got 42. Wow, that's crazy. 16. Oh, this guy's got a ton. Holy moly. 67. 37. I mean, you can even see it in these players, though, right? Like, he's doing all right on some of these. And again, a lot of these players are like, this guy's got only 13 unique champions played. So what you have to understand is, like, there's a big fall off, a big drop off between their most played champions and some of their not most. I'm actually surprised how non-tight these champion pools are here on some of these players. But again, it's like a lot of these players, like 3 or 4 of these players are professional players who are just trying to learn a bunch of different champions, or literally don't care about solo queue because they're just making a living playing on a professional team. And so they can like go into a solo queue game and kind of have fun. But obviously for me as a new player, right, like that's the other difference too, is like when you're already a challenger player, when you're already a GM player, when you're already a master player, going and playing a champion as a first time one-off is going to go better for you than if you're one of the best players on the server, than if you're a new player, you're in bronze, and you're just deciding to randomly first time a champion. So one of the things you got to keep in mind here with this is that you're throwing away a huge amount of games. You can see it here in the middle too. So there's kind of these categories. There's like, here's the champions that are actually working for me. Picks 1 through 4. Then we've got a lot of champions like pick 5, pick 8, pick 9, pick 10. These are champions that I'm playing when I'm getting filled, and I just shouldn't be playing at all. Then there's champions that are kind of in this middling category of like, I have maybe 5 to 20 games played on the champion, and I've sort of committed like 5 to 20 hours of learning the champion, but I didn't end up committing so much that I actually learned the champion. And that can be fine. Better to play for 5 hours on the champion, decide it's not working for you or that you don't like playing the champion, and then to give it up than to continue playing it. But you don't necessarily, especially as a newer player, need to do that in ranked, right? Like you could do that in normals, or you could do that in flex, or you could do it on a Smurf account, so that you're, if your intention is just to climb, that you're not impacting, your climb in that way. And so I would say, look at the champions that are having a positive impact for you. Stop playing games when you're auto-filled. If you're going to commit 5 games to a champion, to learning how to play a champion or seeing how it goes, right, 5 to 20 games, recognize that you're going to lose more than you're going to win most of the time doing that. And maybe you get a new main champion, or maybe you get a new, kind of top couple of champions. Maybe you end up adding that champion to your pool, but chances are that you end up abandoning it and just losing a bunch of games, in that span of 5 to 20 games. And then any champion that you're just kind of one-offing, picking 1, 2, 3 times a season, you're going to lose most of those games, and it's going to, eat away and erode a lot of the gains that you've made on good champions. So when we get into some of the lower ranked players, op.gg, you're going to see this, and this was even true for this account, right, for me in the beginning. A lot of low ranked players have champions that they're winning a huge percentage of their games on, but they just don't have the champion pool discipline in ranked to stick to the champions that they're winning with. And some of these players are the same players who are complaining that ranked is rigged and they can't climb, when if they just stuck to their top 1 or 2 champions, they would be climbing. But they're playing 50 different champions and losing on most of them, and so they aren't climbing, right? And so we get that. So that's where we're at with Season 3. It's going to be a similar story with other seasons. So now we see in season 4, we've still got Leona up here at the top, still winning 57% of my games on Leona. I've decided to commit a ton of games to learning Thresh and done okay. I mean, I'm -8 games, which is quite bad, but on 200 or so games played, it's, really not that bad. And I probably learned a lot about playing Thresh. But again, you can see the difference here. When I picked up Leona, even immediately in ranked in bronze, I was winning 57% of my games with Leona. Then in season 4, when I'm in silver on the champion, boom, I'm winning 57% of my games still. A more difficult champion to play like Thresh, I'm winning 48% of my games for my first 200, 300 games on the champion. So I'm having to commit 300, 400 games on a really mechanically difficult champion as a new player to the game in order to just get to a 50% win rate or to start actually climbing on the champion. So a lot of new players want to play a really cool, flashy, mechanical champion like Yasuo, like Zed, like Yone, or they want to play the Thresh, they want to play the Pike. You're picking these champions that are so difficult to play, that have such a high skill ceiling, and such a low floor for you if you aren't proficient at the game, that you're really hindering yourself, because the amount of time that you need to play in order to start climbing is astronomical compared to other champions. And we can see that with learning a difficult support champion when I started playing like Thresh versus learning a more straightforward engaged support like Leona. And keep this in mind, not just about climbing too, but even about getting better at the game. If you spend so much time just getting to a level of proficiency on a champion like Thresh or Zed or Yasuo or whatever the case may be, one of the issues or the difficulties is that the more complicated your champion is, the longer amount that you'll have to spend just focusing on like your abilities and what you're doing with the champion. And so you're not learning to pay attention to the map. You're not learning to, pay attention to all these other things that are happening in the game, where people are, these opportunities that are coming up, mistakes that are being made, what's happening with the wave. You're missing a lot of what's going on because you're having to spend more brain power focused on the details of playing your champion correctly, because the champion's so complicated. So if you're like a silver Zed player or a Yasuo player, and you're spending all of your mental energy thinking about, where do I W, how do I use my Q, how do I use my E, how do I just use my abilities, you're not going to have good map awareness compared to other players, even at your rank in bronze or silver. You're not going to be thinking about or learning about like wave states or strategy, or like notice when objectives are coming up or when there are plays, or like learning how to roam, or get priority in your lane and then translate that into something else somewhere else. You're going to just be focused on the minute to minute playing and piloting the champion. Whereas if you pick a champion that's really easy to play, like I've recommended, like LS does, if you play Annie in mid lane, if you play like a Malphite in top lane, if you play like an Amumu or something like that in the jungle, if you play in support, simple engaged support like Leona, or a simple enchanter, maybe like a Soraka or a Janna or something like that. If you play straightforward 80 carry, like Ashe or Misfortune or something like that, you're going to have a much quicker road to being comfortable enough at your champion that you're thinking about other things just other than pressing the abilities on your champion. And you're going to start picking up the game a lot better and much faster. So even though I did gain a lot of proficiency and experience by playing these 228 games on Thresh, I didn't climb at all. In fact, I lost some LP doing it. And it was time that I could have spent playing Leona or a different support champion I was having success with that was easier to play, learning the rest of the game instead of focusing on Thresh's complicated mechanics. And B, if I go back to playing Thresh much, much later, which I've done as like a Masters player or something like that, I'm going to not need to take 200 games to learn Thresh, because I'm going to understand a lot of mechanics of the game better anyways and become much better as a player and much more proficient. And so when I come back to learn a champion like Thresh later, even though he's a complicated champion, it's going to take me a lot less games than if I try to play and learn Thresh or Pike or Yasuo or Zed or something like that while I'm a silver player. And so it's way more efficient to focus on playing that easy champion first and then kind of ramp up the difficulty as you get better at the game, or even just, depending on what your goal is with climbing, get to the rank that you want to get to. And then if diamond is your goal or if masters is your goal, once you get to that point, then maybe you expand your champion pool if you want to. The other big thing, of course, that I got to say, always worth mentioning, is that you've got to play what champion you enjoy playing. Because at the end of the day, improving in League and getting better at the game takes a long time, even if you're playing an easy to play champion. You can see, even though I was winning 57% of my games on Leona, at this point I played like 400, 500 ranked games on Leona in my first 2 seasons of playing just to get to like silver or gold. And that's normal. And the reality is that if it takes that long for people to progress and learn the game, then you're going to have to pick a champion and a role and a play style that you don't think is just the best for climbing, but something that you genuinely enjoy doing. So do I think blind picking Braum in Grandmasters is good? No. Do I think it's the smartest thing I could do? No. Do I even think that I'm probably capable of playing other champions that might be better blind pick, especially if I was actually doing that every day and doing it more frequently? Yes, I do think I'm capable of doing that with all the experience that I have. But I also think that I'm so much better at Braum and I enjoy playing the champions so much that I am going to do better in the long run if I just stick with Braum for a while. And if at some point I want to prove to people that I have a bigger champion pool, I'll take a split once I've already gotten Challenger. I'll take a new account and I'll win a bunch of games in silver on 10 different champions. And then I'll play 100 games on Braum to get from high diamond to Challenger once I stop playing those other champions, and then it'll look like I can play 20 different champions, even though I can't. Or I'll just actually play the 10 different champions or whatever that I can play at a Master Plus level or whatever. So you get the idea, right? So here we have a classic case of we've got a decent pool of main champions here in our first 5, but Thresh is a bit of an imposter here because it's taken me 228 games only to go -8, right? And to really learn things about Thresh that I might have learned in 20 games if I just never touched the champion until I hit Masters. So keep that in mind, right? If you've got a champion that you're really slogging along with, if it's your main champion and you enjoy playing the champion, keep going. Sometimes you're going to be stuck at a 50% win rate on your main champion. We'll get into that as we keep going. And that's okay. And it's very important that when you hit your peak rank, when you get stuck, when you need to make some other improvement about the way that you're playing the game, that you don't just give up on your main champion instantly and switch to a new champion. But that's not the problem here. It's not like I'm hard stuck at this rank. Back in Season 4, I'm climbing with multiple different support champions, with Leona at 57%, Morgana on over 100 games played with 57%, on Sona at like over 70 games played with 64%. This is the first season Braum came out, played a bunch of Braum at about 60 games with a 63% win rate. So obviously I have 4 champions here in my support pool at the top that I'm playing a decent number of games on, and then I'm winning about, on average, maybe 57 to 60% of my games on. There's no reason for me to switch to playing, something else, or for me to put in 200 games on a champion that's too mechanically difficult for my skill level and it's going to leave me at a 50% win rate. It's just a waste of time. So Thresh obviously shouldn't really have been here. Looking back on it, right? Don't pick a champion that's too mechanically difficult, too mechanically demanding. We've got a champion here, Lee Sin, so we're still playing that like jungle secondary like we did with Jarvan the previous season, and this is an even more mechanically demanding champion than Jarvan to be playing in jungle, so this obviously isn't good. We end up going -7 here on the Lee Sin. Then we've got a little bit of Nami, but it's a little bit better than before. Like, we're dropping down and there's not even that many games played. But just a couple of games back on Nami, Blitzcrank, a little bit ahead on Soraka, and we get into like that Jarvan jungle secondary still going on, and then we have, like we talked about before, look at this. Now I'm filling top lane with Malphite, and yet I'm actually winning because it's such an easy to play champion or something like that. So keep those sorts of things in mind. And so then we're getting into this range here of like, I'm playing a lot of filled games and other roles in top lane and jungle and stuff like that. I'm playing a lot of different champions with like somewhere between those 5 and 20 games played again, and losing a lot with them. And then we start to get down here. Oh my God, it's a sea of red, right? It's like -2, -4, -6, -8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So this is just 0 and 18, on picks 41 through 54. So obviously that wasn't a good idea. And you'll see this on a lot of low elo players, match history, is you're just stretching yourself too thin, trying to play these champions you don't play. And look, it's not the end of the world, right? Like, did my rank matter a whole lot when I was silver? Did playing these 18 games, you get a lot of value from playing your first game on a champion in terms of learning how that champion works, but it just shouldn't have been in ranked, right? I could have played these 18 games or so, 1 or 2 games on one-off champions that I was either interested in playing or got filled and forced into playing. I could have played those in normal games, learned almost the exact same thing, and not have taken, minus 18 games and wiped out my entire gains on, Morgana or something for the entire season. My third most played champion with a 57% win rate. And again, if we go and look at these players in Challenger who are doing this, even they are actually having like this guy, right? Like, I mean, we can go through it. Let's say two or less games played on a champion. So we've got like 1 and 1. Then we've got 4 wins, 4 losses. So Surdy, a player with like a very high win rate overall, something like 63% win rate on this account overall this split, even though the account was Challenger last split, is winning only 50% of his games on his champions that he's played like 2 or less games on. Well, I guess we didn't include the Lucian here, so maybe he's positive too, but not very good. Right here we've got another player, let's see, 2 games or less, so he's 4, 5, 6, 7, and 3, plus another 4 would be 7 and 7, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be 13 and 7, but then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this guy's -9, or has got those 9 plus the 7 would be 13 and 16, I believe. So this guy's -3 games. Again, ranked 2 player, probably has this 60% win rate overall, but he's -3 games on his last, on all the champions that he's played, 2 or less games on. We don't need to go through all of these accounts, right? But you get the idea, even just from kind of looking at them here. Like, a lot of these guys, when they start stretching themselves thin at the end of their champion pool, are losing more than they're winning, and they'd just be better off never doing these games right here at the bottom of their match history, even for these kind of top tier challenger players. And so you have to ask yourself the question, if Big Dokes can't pull it off, right, with his 2 or less games played champions, then why do you think you, as a newer player who definitely doesn't understand those champions, definitely doesn't have the best possible foundation to go into playing a new champion for the first time, why do you think that you're going to have success on them? So, a lot of wasted games here at the bottom that could have just been, testing a champion or learning a champion for the first time in a normal game. We get into Season 5. I'm a Braum enjoyer. What can I say? Braum came out in Season 4. We saw that I was picking him up as like my 5th champion, doing pretty well, winning like 60% of my games with him. Blitzcrank kind of out of nowhere becomes my main champion, with Braum second. So kind of similar amount of games played on each, but a little bit more on Blitzcrank. And you can see same thing here. Like, I'm doing really well on Blitzcrank and Braum. And these are kind of my 2 main champions. Same thing with Thresh. Despite having put, 200 plus games on Thresh, we're sitting here and we're going -10, spending 78 games playing Thresh. For what reason? Just too difficult of a mechanically demanding champion, especially as I'm going up and up in rank, winning 57% of my games through bronze, through silver, into gold. Now that I'm playing Thresh at an even higher level and playing him less frequently, I'm doing even worse on the champion than I did, the last split I was playing him. So just kind of a huge waste of time and LP on the champion. And then like we've got Leona here, still doing decently with Leona, but didn't play a ton of games on it this season. But it's kind of good. You can see, in a way, even now in Season 5, my champion pool kind of tightening up a little bit, and me playing, mostly just like Blitzcrank and Braum, and then like a decent amount of Leona, and then like this Thresh, which we probably shouldn't have done. And then we've got like filled stuff with like a Moo and Gragas and Wukong and jungle, actually doing pretty decently here in the jungle. It looks like I was winning about 50% of my games on these 3 junglers secondary. So maybe actually finally getting kind of decent at playing jungle as secondary, even in top lane here on Malphite going 12 and 10. But you can see the difference that it's making in champion pool, right? When I'm playing the Amumu jungle in gold, I'm, winning 58% of my games, even as a new player. Malphite, I had won 60% of my games in the previous split, then 55%, because these are easy to play tanks. They're similar to my main champions that I'm playing, which are tanks, as opposed to going out and playing the Jarvan or the Lee Sin or even the Gragas here, things like that. Even the Annie mid lane starting to do well, because I've consistently been playing the same one champion when I've been getting filled into those roles. I still would probably be better off focusing on playing those games on support, because we're talking about over these even just 3 years, 20 games on top lane, 20 games on jungle, 20 games on mid, that's 60 games a year. That's times 3 years. We're talking about like 180 games I could have been putting into getting better at support, which would have obviously made me a lot better player faster. But you can see that like when you're playing simple to play champions, even as filled or secondary, that eventually I'm getting proficient at those champions after a couple of years and able to hold my own in a low rank on those roles. Then we go down and it's just a similar situation, like just 63 unique champions, playing way too many. You can see like way more losses than wins here in these kind of like 5 to 20 games played category. And then you can see like down at the bottom again, 2 or less games played. This actually doesn't even look that bad, but we'll add them up here real quick. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So we got like 16 and what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So 16 and 20. Even here, this didn't even look that bad. And we're, -4 games, wasting 40 games of time or so, on these ones. If we counted 3 or less, like obviously there's a lot of red in this area. So again, it just comes down to when you're looking at your op.gg, your op.gg should not have 63 different unique champions in a split. Instead, you should have like many less than that, right? Like ideally you would have literally just like your 3 or 4 main champions in your role. That would be it. You'd be focusing on learning those champions. You wouldn't play a single game when you're filled or in a secondary role. You wouldn't play a single game on these random other champions you're testing. You'd confine all of that to normals or another account or something like that. And if you find a champion that you're really enjoying, you're going to bring it in. You're going to do a little bit of testing, right? You're going to have to, at some point, start playing the champion in ranked for the first time, even if you had played it in normals or on another account or something. You're going to have to bring it in, and maybe it doesn't work out, and you end up abandoning the champion. But be much more picky with what champions you're willing to put 10, 20 games on in ranked, because it's a lot of time, rather than just going in and kind of like randomly picking a champion, because that's, it's your time's really valuable. Always we're complaining about how much time it takes to climb, especially for a new player. How many massive number of games you need to play in order to get good at the game compared to veteran players who've been playing for years and years and years, and to go up in rank and stuff like that. Well, part of the reason why it's taking so much time is because you're not being considerate with am I willing to put 20 hours of time into this champion? So if somebody asked me at the start of the split, do I want to put 20 hours of time into, 30 different champions or something like that? I would say that doesn't make any sense. Why would I waste my time doing that? I want to play my top 3 or 4 champions. Maybe I'll have like 5 champions throughout the course of the split or the year that I, play 5 or 10 ranked games on and see how it goes after I played a few normal games with them. And if they're a champion I really identify as a champion I might like to play in my role, I don't want to play if I get autofilled, etc. And then all of a sudden I've got like 10 unique champions, like 5 that are actually my main champions and maybe 5 that I'm putting like 5, 10, 20 games on to kind of test. And maybe next split, or even this split, if they are going really well, if I'm like enjoying playing the champion and actually going to commit to learning it, then maybe that, those champions move up from being, 20 games played to being like some of these other ones and having, 60 games or something on, let's say. But you get the idea, right? You cut out a lot of these autofill games. You cut out a lot of these one-off random picks, or 2 games, 3 games, 4 games. You cut out a lot of trying 20 different support champions every split instead of, trying 5 or 10 that you identify as good with your play style, and you'll save yourself a lot of time and you'll climb really quickly. Then we've got season 6 here. Braum's main champion here. Blitzcrank is second. So still sticking to Braum and Blitzcrank. There's kind of continuity here between the seasons. Really, if we go back and look at my main champions, in season 3, I was playing a lot of Leona and Sona. In season 4, I was playing a lot of Leona, doing really well on Sona. It was my best other champion, even though it was my 4th most played. And then this stint on like all these games I played on Thresh. Season 5 and season 6, I main Blitzcrank and Braum. And so you can see here again, similar situation, right? Like doing really well, or decently well. Not even that many games played this split, like less than 200 games on Braum, a little bit like 120 games played on Blitzcrank. So not even that many games played, but doing pretty decently on Braum and Blitzcrank. Janna ended up being a champion this split that I played. It looks like 75 games on with a 59% win rate. So like starting to incorporate that champion into my champion pool and learning that. Same thing with Nautilus here, went 30 and 31. So I played like, not terrible for learning a new champion for the first time. I'm about breaking even on Nautilus on about 60 games. A little bit of Taric still in here, a little bit of Sona in here, a little bit of Karma. All these things doing fine. The Thresh is still here, Alistar, Leona still here, although, getting rustier and playing less and less of the champion. So we can see here that like I've got a top 10, almost all positive except for like -2 games on Leona, I guess, and -1 game on Nautilus. So really I've got about 10 support champions here that I'm playing, at about a 50% win rate or above. And not one champion really standing out much more than the other ones, but also I'm not playing a lot of games this season here. It looks like there's this Skarner, but don't be thrown off by this Skarner. This was in Twisted Tree Line back in the day. I got placed into bronze with my friends in Twisted Tree Line, and I was so upset that I was in bronze. I was like, I gotta get out of bronze. I gotta at least be in silver in Twisted Tree Line. So I ended up playing 20 games of Skarner in bronze Twisted Tree Line and going 14 and 6 with Skarner. So don't think that I suddenly found some. This was Skarner Jungle back in the day. So don't think that I found some crazy pick here or something like that. In fact, it looks pretty good because we see, and maybe this is when role select comes into the game or something too, but we don't see 20 games on Jarvan or on Lee Sin or something like that. Well, maybe a little bit. Okay, I guess we got like 11 games on Kha'Zix here somehow doing really well. We've got like 7 games of Amumu. So we do have a little bit of getting filled, a few games here mid, but definitely it looks like I'm getting filled in these other roles much less. So overall, a lot of improvement here in some ways because my champion pool over the years has actually gotten pretty decent even on playing 10 different champions. I wouldn't necessarily even say that for looking at a player like this, it'd probably be better if I was focused, especially how little I was playing this season, probably be better to focus on 3 or 4 of these champions, right? I'm spending a lot of time learning Nautilus, learning Janna, etc. But this is part of the learning process. If you want to be a good player with a good champion pool, at some point you're going to have to learn it. Was season 6 when I was in what was I at in season 6? Oh, I hit diamond for the first time. Well, I mean, that's not too bad, right? So, yeah, maybe I decided at that point that I needed to have a bit of a better champion pool, and I was working on that. Seems totally fine. I wouldn't necessarily say that I was doing so much better with Braum or so much better with, maybe Jana and Sona were working really well, but it's a low sample size of games, so it's kind of hard to tell. I wouldn't say that I was doing so much better on any one of these 10 supports that I should have been exclusively focusing on one, or like that it was at least obvious to an outside person trying to help like this person with this op.gg. It's not obvious which 1 or 2 or 3 supports you should be focusing on here. But I would say, of course, if I had done 3 supports instead of 10, and instead of learning 5 new support champions and playing 5 champions I'm familiar with, if I was focused on 3 or 4, I would have had, again, most of the benefits of having a diverse champion pool, being able to pick different things in different situations, while also being able to focus on those 3 or 4 champions a lot better. And so maybe now instead of 52% on Blitzcrank and Braum, maybe I have the higher win rate like before. Less auto-filled games, but that may not be because I was paying more attention to dodging. That may just be that in this season the roll select was introduced into the game or something like that. Or, so that may be the case. And then, of course, even when it comes to unique champions, still pretty bad here at 49 unique champions played. Still pretty abysmal down here at the bottom of the list. But obviously playing a lot less games of jungle and stuff like that, and doing better in the games that I was playing on jungle or mid. My champion pool getting better and stuff like that on support seems like it's getting gradually better every season. Like we're tightening up the champion pool. We are playing less filled games, and we're probably getting to the point where we're going to start to see less unique champions overall in ranked as well. Right. Okay. So then we get to season 7. Now, season 7 is infamous because season 7 is the ardent meta, but it's also the year that I really committed to playing a lot of Braum. So you can see, rather than, in season 5 and season 6, I played a lot of Braum and Blitzcrank, maybe even in, So in season 5 and season 6, I'd played, mostly a lot of Braum and Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank I don't play nearly as much this season as Braum. I play nearly 500 ranked games on Braum, come back with a vengeance, 50%. I only win 3 more games on 500 games of Braum than I lost. Why? Because it's Ardent meta. And actually, right before Ardent meta, there was a poke support meta where people were playing Malzahar, Karma, Zyra support. You couldn't ask for a worse year to try to commit to being a Braum player than season 7. So maybe that was not a good decision in that meta to continue with Braum. And certainly, right, if I was stuck at a 50% win rate on Braum, maybe after the first 100 games, maybe after the first 200 games, hell, maybe even after the first 300 games, I probably should have recognized it was time to switch to Jana. Because Jana here, second most played during the Ardent meta, 60% win rate on Jana on 340 games played. So if I had played 700 games of Jana during the Ardent meta, I may have well hit Masters back in season 7. Who knows? There was also stuff going on too, like, they had moved the server away. Again, was originally playing in Seattle on about 20 ping, and then they had moved the server from California to Chicago around this time. So at the same time as Braum was super weak into a harsh poke meta, and then into the Ardent meta against a bunch of enchanters that poke him out and then outscale him, which is just the worst possible matchups the entire year. And my ping went from 20 to 60. So a lot of the reason why I get stuck in season 6, I hit Diamond 5 for the first time, it looked like. Season 7, let's see where we're at here in season 7. We end in Plat 1, but I hit Diamond. Season 7 was a disaster. Basically, I'm getting to Diamond 4, Diamond 5, demoting, getting back to Diamond 4, Diamond 5, demoting. I think it may have been the year, I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, it may have been, where I demoted from diamond to platinum, like, I want to say 7 times in one year. And this is when it was hard to demote from Diamond 5 to Platinum. It took losing like more than 20 games than you won at the bottom of a rank to demote. So maybe that was the year after this. I'm not quite sure, but it seems like it because I ended in Plat instead of Diamond. So very terrible time to be a Braum player. But obviously the Jana was working out. So this brings us to quite a interesting other example, right? Which is where, yes, you want to play a champion that you enjoy playing, but it's not to say if I put in 337 games or 340 games on Jana, obviously I didn't hate the champion. So if I'm winning 60% of my games on Jana and 50% of my games on Braum, both of them on a ton of games played, obviously would have been a lot better off playing mostly the Jana and less of the Braum. And so you've got different scenarios here. We've got the games where we're just playing one-off champions in ranked instead of first timing these champions in normals. Let's call it like first time, 1 or 2 games played on these champions. Just shouldn't be picking that in ranked for the most part, unless we're at least willing. It's that, if I'm going to pick a champion ever in ranked, I should be queuing up, expecting to play that champion maybe the whole day, willing to play 5 or 6 games on that champion, not just picking that champion randomly in the 20 seconds I have to think about what I'm going to pick in champion select, as a total one-off when I'm not used to it and don't have any setup or know what I'm doing. Minimizing that, minimizing the games you're playing other roles and autofills, minimizing those games where you either have those one-offs or you're only playing 5 to 20 games, kind of learning the champion, kind of feeling if the champion is going to work for you. Could be done in normals, could be limited to, a more select pool of 5 or 10 champions a year you're kind of considering adding to your champion pool. You want to test it in rank. You want to see how it's going for you in rank, but you're not necessarily willing. And then half of those should end up being so many games played anyways. They don't finish in that, 5 to 20 game category anyways. And then keeping your number of unique champion picks, which should be covered by all of these things, but keeping your number of unique champion picks way, way low, like, 10, 20 unique champion picks in a split, not, like we see here again, this is 69. It's actually gotten worse. Nice. Okay, so we got, oh my goodness. I mean, look at this at the bottom. I mean, I don't even want to add these up, but that's a lot of lost games. I'll tell you that much. Okay. So that's not good, right? So essentially, this was a split of desperation in a lot of ways because of the meta. It's no surprise here that we see 70 unique champions. It's very easy when you're stuck at your peak. So keep in mind that up until season 7, I had been gaining like a rank every year, right? I had been going up and up and up. You're seeing me win 57% of my games on Leona for 2 seasons in a row, then doing quite well, on a multitude of champions for 2 seasons in a row, kind of 55% win rate-ish, and then kind of plateauing here in season 7. And it's like, this is a tremendous amount, almost 70 more wins than losses on Jana, and yet even with the 70 more wins than losses on Jana, I'm not climbing this season. It's because I'm negative 70 games, and I'm slightly positive with Karma, slightly positive with Braum. A couple games back on like learning Lulu in the Ardent meta, but not doing too bad. A couple of games back on Thresh. I even played Kale support during the Ardent meta and did pretty well. But, basically we can see that if we fall off from here, that I've lost so many games on so many champions, all these random champions, even in other roles again, that I've basically just eroded most of the gains that I've made out of my top couple of champions, mostly on Jana here with 60%. I've just eroded them all by, playing Lulu and losing 5 more than I won, playing Thresh and losing 6 more than I won, playing Alistar and losing 5 more than I won, playing Rakan and losing 7 more than I won, and then all these champions at the bottom, playing Ahri mid and losing 5 more than I won, Malzahar, maybe this was actually support and losing 4 more than I won, Soraka and losing 5 more than I won, etc., going 0-4 on Irelia, not even in my role, maybe just this is just kind of a bad start to playing Leona and then kind of abandoning the champion at 0-3 after her having been my main champion. 0-2 on like 10 different champions or something like that. 0-1 on like 20 different champions. It's just taking all of the progress that I've made and throwing it away for absolutely no reason. Okay, so then we get into like season 8. And season 8, Braum's back, baby. We make a bit of a comeback. We're winning 54% of our games on Braum, doing pretty well. And way better champion pool discipline. Maybe not overall. At least at the top, right? Like vast majority, about 400 games played on Braum, and then it'll fall off all the way down to like 30 games played on Soraka, slightly positive. So I'm basically one-tricking Braum in season 8. But not doing so well on the Janna or the Blitzcrank. This was Trundle Jungle. Yeah, this was Trundle Jungle. This was top lane. So, but then we fall into some of the same bad patterns of before, like playing a lot of games off of support. And then really again here at the bottom, like negative 20 or 30 games just from playing a bunch of random champions in all kinds of different roles. And that's just going to erode. You see, I only went really positive 30 games on Braum here or so, maybe positive 35 games or something like that, 36 or something, 35. All of those games just eroded by these random champions that I'm playing. So again, a lot of players that I'm seeing, you think that you're hard stuck. I thought that I was hard stuck in high plat, low diamond, and I really wasn't on my main champion, but I spent so many games playing random stuff in other roles and other champions and things that I just eroded any progress that I made instantly with my main champion, which is just a dumb waste of time. And then here's the other thing, like that I want to really stress and emphasize. There were plenty of times in season 7 and season 8 when I was having a tough time and I was only winning 50% of my games on Braum for 20, 40 games in a row in high plat and in low diamond. And I was thinking to myself, Braum's not working for me anymore. I'm not climbing with this champion. Let me switch to a new champion. I've had success with Janna in the past, or I've had success with Blitzcrank in the past, or I've had success with this or that. And so then I switched to a champion that I'm actually much less competent on recently, that I'm rusty on, and that I have not proven that I can win as many games as on Braum. And all of a sudden, I'm switching away from playing my main champion right when I get to my peak and get stuck. When you get to your peak and get stuck and start winning 50% of your games on your main champion, unless it's just not the right main champion for you, you don't enjoy playing it, or it's way too mechanically demanding of a champion for you at the rank that you're at, really you should stick with your main champion for the most part and ride it out, because there are going to be long stretches in climbing in League, especially as you start to get up there in the ranks and it starts to get harder to figure out what to do. There are going to be long stretches of time where for 100, 200, 300 games, you're not going to make progress and you're going to be hard stuck and need to figure something out or get better. But you're not going to figure those things out and get better by starting all over again and picking a new champion. You have to keep playing your main champion that got you there in the first place, because then you're trying to go from, where you are here with your main champion to slightly better by improving at your main champion. If you say, well, I'm not making any progress on my main champion, then you go back to square one and start picking a champion you've never played before, or a champion that you haven't played as much or that you're rusty on. You're going to do even worse. And then you'll spend all of your time, the whole split, just climbing to your peak with your main champion, getting stuck there for 10, 20, 30 games, getting impatient, switching back to a champion that you're rusty on, going down a division or two or more, on a slide, on a losing streak, whatever, and then switching back to your main champion to climb back up, only to switch off of it and get stuck again. And you're like Sisyphus with the boulder, pushing the boulder up the hill forever. And you're not getting anywhere because you're not committing to making the improvement with your main champion you need to make when you get hard stuck. You just abandon your main champion and start flailing around in champion select and picking all kinds of things. And it's going to sound like a personal attack, but I know this because I did this a lot in season 7 and season 8. And that's why, even though I was winning 54% of my games on Braum on 400 games played, even though I was winning 60% of my games on Janna on 300 and something games played, I wasn't climbing. And it was because of all of these random champion picks that I'm doing, playing other roles, all this wasted time. And it's sad because, that's the difference. It's literally the difference between like being really great at the game and just being a little bit stuck, is just stepping back and looking at the bigger picture and saying, hey, what am I doing with my champion pool? Where's my champion pool discipline? Why am I picking these champions that I'm not having success on, or that are too hard for my main rank? Or why am I not sticking with my main champion when I'm getting stuck and need to make progress? Because I think people don't want to admit that they're stuck and that they're not better, and that the champion is such an easy thing to blame. Well, my champion isn't good right now, or my champion's not the best in the meta, or not the best champion I could be picking, or if I only picked this other champion I see other people having success on, I'll do fine. But you don't know how to play that champion as well as your main champion. It'll take you hundreds of games to get there, or dozens of games to get there. It's not worth it. You got to stick with your main champion. And the problem is, when you're hard stuck, is making improvements to your gameplay on your main champion and just getting that much better past your peak on your main champion, not going backwards. So season 9, pretty inactive. It was first year I started college. So season 9, you can see I played less than 100 games of Braum, 51% win rate, playing other roles for fun. Like, there's literally no support champion pool anymore in season 9. It's literally just Braum, and then playing a few games of Jax in top lane, playing a few games of Ashe in AD carry, playing a few games of Amumu in jungle, basically nothing. In some ways, it is the best season we've had so far in terms of champion pool discipline, with only 21 unique picks, but only because I wasn't really playing that much. So now 2020, COVID happens, we're back, baby. And, we've got a little bit over 300 games of Braum, 54% win rate, over 100 games of Morgana, 54% win rate, still doing poorly on Thresh, still shouldn't be picking that champion, doing all right on the Lulu. Here we've got like Yuumi. This is a perfect example of like under 20 games, trying to learn the champion for the first time, not having success with it. Yuumi is definitely not my cup of tea. She is one of, even worse than Thresh for me, one of the worst champions I have ever played for me. And it's crazy because at times, and I've played Yuumi at many different times, at times she's been gutted and actually been very bad as a champion. But at other times, she's been extremely strong. And I just couldn't make the champion work for me in solo queue. I wasn't duo with people when I was playing Yuumi. I was just playing it in solo. I can't ward. I can't walk. I can't trade. My AD carries 1v2 in lane. I'm just dying if my AD carry positions poorly. It was not a pretty sight to behold, especially for mostly like a tank engaged support player, right? So let's see. Here we have a legit season, though, where I'm playing hundreds of games, and yet I've only got 28 unique champion picks, so we're bleeding less games at the bottom. But still, nonetheless, right, if we capped this at 10, we'd be in a really great spot, but still, nonetheless, losing way more than I'm winning at the bottom of my champion pool here, or if you want to call it that, or my unique champion picks in ranked here. Still not doing well in that regard. Oh, it gets a little bit better, only 19 if you go to solo queue. I forgot that we could go to solo queue here. 2021, peak of COVID, putting 700 games on Braum. Leona's back, doing decently with that on a little bit over 100 games played. And then look at the drop off here, right? We're going from decent chunk, ton of games on Braum, decent chunk of games on Leona, few games on Cho'Gath, and then really not so many on other stuff. 35 unique picks. Maybe, this is solo queue. Not so great. Again, you can just see bleeding games at the bottom of the pool, at the bottom of the list for no reason. Losing a bunch of games on Lee Sin for no reason. But this was actually a very successful season, and we can kind of talk about that. This is a unique season, or a weird season. So I think this was the first season I got Masters, if we go look back. So now 2021. Yeah, this is the first season I went from being hard stuck in high plat and low diamond to finally getting Masters for the first time. And so there's really a story here in these season 2021 games for me, which is I didn't start out basically one-tricking Braum in this season. I started out, like a lot of seasons, picking all kinds of random champions, losing all over the place, like with all this garbage nonsense, right? Not doing very well, hitting diamond at the start of the split like I had done most of those couple of seasons in a row. I ended up in platinum, but then demoting all the way out into plat. And but look at this. What ends up happening is I have a particular game on Lee Sin mid, because this was a season where people had started taking like Lee Sin and Graves and stuff like mid lane and top lane. So I played a game of Lee Sin mid. It must have been in like plat 4, like the lowest in plat that you could be. And I lost, and I was so frustrated that after playing the game so much, I was just trolling on Lee Sin mid and wondering why I was picking that and what I was doing, and like, did I want to stay stuck in plat, and why am I playing with these terrible players on my team? And I was thinking to myself, the reason why I'm playing at such a low rank in such low quality games is because I don't have the discipline and the commitment to stick to my main champion, play my main champion most of the vast majority of my games, stop trolling on these picks like Lee Sin and stuff like that, and start actually focusing on just playing the game and playing the things that are going to help me to climb. And so what's interesting is I would say the vast majority of this match history here of these stats came from before I started climbing, when I was just stuck in plat again. And then I go into playing, more games than I had played, I think, almost in any season on a single champion, which was like over 700 games on Braum, and just slowly grinding out at a 54% win rate, finally going from like low diamond and high platinum to masters over time, getting better, making incremental improvements, and things changed that helped, right? Like I was in a place where I was now on a lower ping environment. We don't need to go through all the things that I did in order to get to masters. There's a video on that if you're interested in that, like how I got to masters or how I got to GM. I think there's 2 videos about that. Pretty similar concepts. I do think that my ping going down helped a lot. I think that my champion pool discipline, which is a huge part of what this video is about, my champion pool and my champion pool discipline was the difference maker. And I think that if you look back at these seasons that I was stuck between 2021 and let's say season 6 or season 7, when I had hit diamond for the first time, the reason I was stuck for those 5 years is because I'm constantly losing 20 to 30 more games than I win, at the bottom of my stat page on pick, unique champion pick number 20 through 40 or 50 in solo queue, instead of just focusing on, again, a main pool of like 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 champions, especially if you're a newer player. The newer, the less it should be. The lower rank you are, the less it should be. Of non-complicated, straightforward, easy to play champions that have a high skill floor, meaning that even if you play your worst you can play on the champion, you're going to have a decent level that you're playing the champion at because it's simple enough to play. You're going to be able to learn the rest of the game. And then, of course, other things changed to help me as well, like ping and trying to improve and better discipline and stuff like that, better ability usage and things like that helped me a lot as well. But champion pool discipline was a huge part of this. And then we get into like 2022. There's still 44 unique picks. We're still bleeding a lot of games here at the bottom of the, the charts here. But again, basically just one-tricking Braum. Not making a whole lot of progress here in 2022. Pretty even, pretty even, I would say, overall in general. So not a great 2022. So let's see. In 2022, I believe I'd probably just stayed. Oh, yeah. So not only did I stay in Masters, but I ended up demoting to D2 at the end of the season. So that kind of makes sense. And then if we look at like 2023, again, 28 unique champions. If we go to solo queue, 24 unique champions, really getting it down there. But look at this. Even when we start getting like champion 8 and below now, especially as I focused on a narrower pool of champions, and some of my other champions have decayed and gotten rusty, unless I'm willing to put, again, 30, 40 plus games onto those champions, they're going to remain rusty and not be good for me to pick 10 times. So, we can see lots of still bleeding, negative games at, on these lesser picked champions, even in other roles and stuff like that, playing, Caitlyn and LeBlanc and Cassidon and stuff on my main, which I don't play. But doing pretty well here on Braum. and going positive 30 even in Masters on Braum. So that's pretty good. If I was just sticking to playing Braum, that'd be, quite good. And then, and not a ton of games played, a lot of stuff going on, but much better champion pool discipline here overall. So even though, not playing that many games, maybe not making that much progress here, pretty good stuff in only playing, 15 unique champions, of which I think almost every single one of these is support. We've got Annie and Maokai and stuff. As the Maokai may have been jungle, actually. Some of it was support. Most of it was jungle. Annie may have been a mix between mid and support. Cho'Gath could have been a lot of different places. I did play some Cho'Gath support, so it's possible this was support. But a lot better champion pool discipline here, even though not playing a lot of games, not making a lot of progress. And then, well, we went through these ones already, but like obviously last split, I tried to, play like 20 games on about 10 different unique champions. I didn't quite do it on 10 unique champions. I guess total I did it, but or came close on most. But you can see here again, 19 unique champions, almost all of them in support. Again, Maokai may have been a little bit in jungle, but mostly in support. One game of Aurelian Soul, one game of Renekton. But other than like 2 games where I went 1-1 off roll, maybe the Amumu was, but maybe the Amumu was support as well. Maybe the Shen was top lane as well. But really only, we're talking about an entire season where I played 300, 400 games, only playing like 4 games off roll, right? So very good champion pool discipline. And again, 53% win rate, positive 22 on Braum, and positive on a lot of these other champions as well. 58% on Nautilus, couple games positive on Nautilus, couple of games positive on Nami, couple of games positive on Maokai, etc. A couple of games positive on Lulu and Rakan. And so making decent progress, across the board. And then obviously this split, even better champion pool discipline. Look at this. 7 unique champions played so far in the split. And again, I'm not as active of a player as I used to be, but making good progress. And look at this, 55% win rate on Braum and solo queue, already nearly positive 20 games. And my other champions, that I'm playing, still doing well with those. 4-0 on Leona, positive 4 on Nautilus, positive 3 on Lulu, going even on the Nami from last split that I had been playing a lot of this split. And then, 1-1 on Blitzcrank, 1-1 on Karma. So just what you can see is that over the years, what did I do with my champion pool? I got better at playing fewer and fewer games off roll, because you're wasting your time if you're just trying to improve and learn. You're wasting your time trying to learn a role you're not trying to learn right now. And, well, sure, it'll make you maybe a better player. Like, having played all of those games definitely made me a better player in the long term, for sure. But wasn't what I wanted to be doing to be climbing, and I would have been a better support player faster if I had been playing those games on support. So that's the reality of the situation, right? I could have non-stress, without stagnating an entire ranked season over it, gone and played 20 unique games on 20 different champions in normals if I wanted to learn the game a little bit better, or on another account. Over the years, almost no games on autofill. If I'm off roll, waste of time to practice, waste of LP, waste of MMR. So cut out autofill games. Reduce the champion pool down to only 1 to 3 main champions per split, or per season even, let's say, or at least at a time, right? Maybe the meta shifts and maybe you do legitimately need to swap. Let's talk about meta a little bit. Meta is important the higher up you go, right? So a little bit important, right? If I was playing in like the Ardent meta, obviously even when I was in Diamond 4, Diamond 5 back then, playing in the Ardent meta on Braum did have a significant impact on my win rate. It was probably having like a 4 or 5% impact on my win rate, which was the difference between me slowly climbing from Diamond to Masters for the first time to stagnating. Or at least it would have been, except I had a 60% win rate on Janna, and then I tanked the account on a bunch of other champions. So had I, just focused on the Janna, or just focused on Janna and Braum, I still would have been very positive. So limit the number of games off roll or autofill. Limit your main champion pool to, let's say, 3 champions max that are your best 3 champions. You go through your op.gg over the years, you find your best 3 champions in your role that you know you're going to practice and enjoy playing, and you play a decent number of games on those 3 champions. If you're considering adding champions to your champion pool, you play them in a normal game first, maybe even play them in a couple of normal games first. You look up a guide, you actually look up some items and runes, you have an idea of what you're doing, and you don't just decide to play them one time randomly because of what your team picked or what the enemy team picked, but you intentionally decide, I'm going to learn this champion. I'm going to spend a day playing 5 games on the champion and see how it goes. Or I'm going to play 10 games on the champion this split and see how it goes. Or I'm going to play 20 games on this champion, or aim to play 20 games on this champion and see how it goes. And if it's not going well, you stop playing it. You focus back on your 3 champions or whatever. You take a hit for trying to have learned the champion, but not that big of a deal, right? And if you really cared, if you really wanted to, you could just learn the champion mostly in normals, or you could go play it on another account if you have, another account that you could go try to learn the champion on. And then when you're doing well with it on the other account, at a similar comparable rank or something like that, hopefully, then maybe you bring it into your main and play it a little bit. That way you have your 3 or 4 main champions, right, in your main pool. That's your actual champion pool. And then you have, in terms of unique picks over the split or over the year, you maybe have 10, maybe 20 max unique picks over the course of the year. And those like 17 or 16 picks that aren't your actual champion pool are you trying to potentially expand your champion pool by testing out some new champions a little bit, but not just randomly picking a champion in solo queue because you have 20 seconds to think and you've decided now's a really good time this one game randomly for one champion that you don't play because it's good in that situation. So that's what we're looking for. There's a lot that you can gain out of just looking in depth at your op.gg and figuring out what should I be doing, with my champion pool. So now let's take a look. We can do a couple of things here, actually. I wanted to look at some low ranked accounts on the leaderboard. So obviously we're in Challenger. So let's see if we can go to instead of page 10, let's go to page 1000. Let's try that. And so this is Emerald 3. Let's go a little bit lower. Let's try page 2000. We're in Platinum now. Let's go a little bit lower. Let's try to find in Gold or something like that. Okay, we're close. Let's try 350. Oh, 3,500. Okay, so we got some Gold players here. So let's take a look at some of these Gold players. Some of these accounts are going to be Smurfs. One day we'll do kind of an analysis of whether the accounts are Smurfs. So, but let's take a look at people who aren't Smurfing for a second. But obviously, like I said, you can kind of tell, right, if the account's level 45, 34, 52, 45, Smurf account, Smurf account, Smurf account, Smurf account, Smurf account, we've got 1, 2, 3 legit accounts, right, or main accounts. Then we've got 1, 2, this one's borderline, but probably 2 Smurf accounts here. 3, 4, I mean, the vast majority of accounts are Smurf accounts, no? It's well over 50% are in double digit levels. There's some more here. It looks like about half of them are Smurf accounts. That's crazy, just at a glance, by the way. So if anyone wants to do some data analysis and tell us what percentage of accounts in low rank are between level 30 and level 100 or level 99, let's say, let us know, because this looks like an awful lot. So we've got, let's see, this Duck guy, we've got McCarl, this guy, and then we've got Fivlev, and then we've got this guy. So we'll just look at a couple op.ggs, and then I'll pull up some op.ggs from the coaching requests actually on the Discord. So again, we have a Discord server up now where we're going to be sharing help and advice with each other, answering questions all the time on Discord. You can give content suggestions for video ideas on there, and hopefully we'll get a community together of players who want to improve at the game, who want to get coaching and get coached. Maybe we'll just want an op.gg review, and I'll do some of that at some point and upload some of that content if it's helpful. And hopefully we'll get some other coaches in there who are interested in doing something like that. So once we have more people in there, we'll really get that going. So let's take a look. Let me just open some op.ggs of some players who have put their usernames in here, because a lot of coaching that you can do, a lot of improvement can just be made by quickly taking a look at somebody's op.gg, to be really honest with you. Let's see. So we've got this guy. This guy's E West. So let's see here. So let's change this to E West. Is he going to come up? Yeah, here we go. And then we've got this guy. This guy's NA, I think. And then we've got this guy. Although he just said he just started playing League 2 weeks ago. Oh, he's level 21. Interesting. We'll take a look at a leveling account too. And then we've got this guy. So we'll just take a look because I think it'll be interesting to do some of this. So we'll take a look at some of these guys. Let's just update all these profiles really quickly, and then we'll take a look at some low elo op.ggs and see if they're suffering from some of the same problems that we've seen when we went through my long-term ranked history, my entire ranked history in Climb. Are they playing too many unique picks and dropping a lot of games at the kind of the bottom of their champion picks list? Are they not focusing on a specific pool of champion? Okay, so this guy's barely played this season at all, right? So let's maybe take a look at like his last split or something like that. Okay, so this guy, like, look at this guy, right? Okay, so here's a guy, I mean, he's level 110, so it's kind of borderline whether the account's a Smurf account or not. It's totally possible that he started playing like 3 splits ago and that he's level 110 and that it's a main account. But it is also possible, of course, that that it's a Smurf account. So let's see where we started out here. 2022, 2023, split 1, 20. Okay, so this is where we started out. The guy was winning 57% of his games on 240 games played on Jacks. He was negative on Aatrox, negative 10 games on Aatrox, and he was positive about 10 games on Darius with a 57% win rate, negative 15 games on Graves with a 38% win rate, 4-4 on Jace, 0-2 on Karthus, 0-1 on Brand. So I don't know, hard to say. Maybe this account to me looks like maybe somebody learning top lane for the first time. It could be legitimately a new player, or it could be a Smurf who's like learning how to play top lane for the first time. But very good champion pool discipline, right? You can see that this guy like stuck to really just like, it looks like 3 champions top. It'd be interesting to know whether Graves was jungle or not, but it's hard to say because there's no, you know, this was from so long ago. I don't think we're going to be able to see Graves in his match history. But he stuck to a pretty good champion pool discipline. Even though he had really good champion pool discipline, and this is very nitpicky, you can definitely see that like pick 6 and 7 didn't help, right? Like these one-off picks, just 2, 6, and you know, he went like, you know, 2 6.5 deaths and 1.5 assists, so just terrible Karthus gameplay. Had one game where he went 3, 11, and 3 on Brand, just terrible Brand gameplay. So just don't pick those one-off champions at all, right? These should have been like dodges because he was like maybe filled jungle or like off of his champions and stuff like that. But very good champion pool discipline, especially compared to me when I was starting out with this. So again, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe this is possibly a new player who's got really good champion pool discipline and figured out what they wanted to main, like doing decently on top lane. Maybe it's a Smurf who's, you know, not very proficient or got to their main rank very quickly, or is like not playing the same role that they main. Yeah, it does look like the Graves is in jungle. but it doesn't look like he necessarily plays jungle either because his Graves wasn't doing that well. So he started in Emerald 1, right, on that big climb. And then if we take a look at his last split, he did pretty decently here, like on the Jax again, 52% win rate. On the Darius, 53% win rate. Again, very tight champion pool discipline, but he ended up demoting all the way from, I mean, he didn't demote all the way from Emerald 1 to Platinum 2, but like he got placed lower and never managed to climb back, I'm assuming, right, if we look at this. This is not enough time period to go back to that split. But, I mean, we can see here his Graves jungle is terrible. So this is like me playing Lee Sin jungle, right? And like losing all those games. He's just playing 50 games on Graves jungle at a 34% win rate and losing all of his games. I could have told you from looking at his first split here, where he went 4-4 on Jace and was doing pretty poorly on the champion, that there's no reason for him to necessarily, unless he just really enjoys playing the champion. Look, he's at a 30% win rate playing Graves jungle secondary. He's 4-4 on Jace with a pretty bad KDA, averaging like 5, 7, and 5, 1.39 KD. I just wouldn't have recommended that this guy continued playing Jace when he's already got like 3, solid top lane champions that are working well for him. And he's got pretty good champion pool discipline. And again, imagine the amount of time in LP and rank that this guy would have saved if he had just not played any of these games of Graves jungle. In fact, this guy might legitimately been a new player who might have, because he ended Emerald 1 despite all these Graves games, this guy might have been either a new player or someone learning top lane for the first time who might have just ended their first split in Diamond 5 had he just not played Graves jungle. Then we go to the next split, right? And it's the same problems again. Instead of just going 4-4 on Jace and cutting his losses, he ends up going -10 on Jace, doing pretty poorly on the champion here again. And then same thing, he ends up going 19-37 on Graves jungle. So he's just getting really beat up on Graves jungle. Aatrox was also another champion that he wasn't doing well on if we look at the previous split. He was 46% win rate on Aatrox after playing over 100 games on the champion, yet he continued to play it and then lost another, 12 more games than he won at a 41% win rate on Aatrox. So this is a guy that in his first split is winning 57% of his games on Jax and Darius, has really good champion pool discipline, but is playing all these games off-roll. So it's weird because he's playing all of his off-roll games on jungle on one champion, which is better than like playing it on 10 different champions, but he's still losing a bunch when he's playing jungle because he's better at top lane than jungle. So just don't play the jungle games. Again, don't play the jungle games. Probably shouldn't have kept playing Jace here when you've already got 2 champions that you're having success on. And again, no reason to play 68 games on a champion you've already played 120 games on and are winning 46% on. Now he's winning 41% on it. And so he ended up being not able to climb back to Emerald 1 because he was doing really bad and losing a lot of games on these other champions. Now this split, he's barely played the game, and so he's really just not climbing very much. And in fact, maybe he quit the game because he was stuck in Platinum 2 when he was Emerald before, and maybe maybe it's a Smurf account and he's just not playing as much on this account. Maybe, something else happened. This was the time period, right, where a lot of players were able to get accounts into Emerald off of placements for basically no reason, and then ended up obviously not having an easy time winning games there. So maybe this guy had that success and then stopped having success on the account and quit. Maybe he got frustrated that he wasn't climbing or that he had gone backwards a rank and ended up quitting because of that. But, for whatever reason, the guy's basically gone now. And I wonder if it actually has to do with the fact that he was doing so poorly on these champions instead of just sticking to the stuff that was working for him and giving him success. But, he gets an A for champion pool discipline, but I guess an F for playing, 50 games of jungle every season when he gets that role secondary instead of ever hitting the dodge button. Okay, so we got another player here. This player's also gold 1. Let's take a look. Level 124. So this one's also kind of borderline between like, are they a new player? Are they a Smurf? It looks like they're a new player, right? They're playing a ton of games, 300 games played. The last player played a decent number of games too. Not this split, but on their splits where they were actually climbing and stuff. So 300 games at a 51% win rate, even if it's not a new player, even if it's like somebody on a new account, this player definitely deserves a round gold. So, well, maybe not. Well, this is what's interesting, right? Is then I'm looking here, and the guy's crazy on Lux and winning 58% of his games on his most played champion and 56% of his games on Morgana with crazy KDs, on 50 and 52 games played, really good win rate. So he should have like a 57% win rate, and yet he's got 300 games played with a 51% win rate. So how come we've played 300 games, but only 1/3 of our games are on our main two champions, right? Again, like I said, your main 2, 3 champions should be 90% of your games played, and your other 10% should just be learning new champions on your main role when you already have a game plan, when you've already done research into the champions, when you are pretty sure you want to commit a lot of games to learning the champion. That's what you should be doing, not playing 66% of your games on a bunch of random champions. So we can see here that they threw away the progress that they had made, +8 games on Lux and +6 games on Morgana. Well, they go negative, what, like 9? Yeah, they go -9 on Twisted Fate. So that knocks away all of the progress that they made on Lux with this one champion, and minus, 1 game out of the 6 that they made in progress with Morgana. And people may look at this account and say, wow, they have shiny KDs, but you could dive into replays from a player like this, and there is such a thing as a KDA player who doesn't understand how to win games, how to translate their success into winning games. And so really easy when you're playing champions like Morgana and Lux and Twisted Fate. These are champions that are very easy to get assists on, and to just throw an ability on somebody. Twisted Fate not quite as much, but still, I mean, you're able to global around to get to plays that are happening. It's very easy on these champions to play very safe, not do a whole lot of damage, not do a whole lot, and be able to get a bunch of assists. So we can see, for example, like, let's take a look. Their average damage dealt on Lux, Morgana, and Twisted Fate is pretty low. It's like 20k damage, which is like, are they playing at mid? Yeah, it looks like they're mostly playing mid. Not a great amount of damage here. Like, really averaging about 20k damage on a mid laner, on mage or whatever, is not that great. And then averaging 5 CS per minute and expecting to get to plat, right? Like, this person's high gold, like low plat, with the way that they're playing currently, even with bad champion pool discipline. If this person had good champion pool discipline and maybe didn't continue to play champions they weren't having success with, like Twisted Fate and other champions at the bottom of their list, they may well be, in platinum right now. And to get to like emerald or diamond with 5 CS per minute is a big ask, even if you have good KDs, especially not doing a whole lot of damage, basically like not actively participating as much as you could be. This Kale is really wild. What's going on there with the Kale? Okay, so we got like flash on that key. Yeah, flash is on the same key. I don't know. There's a lot of success on the Kale here. I guess it's not, it's 34 games. It's a pretty good sample size. So 74% win rate. This is incredible. But so that makes me wonder if they're smurfing in main Kale or something, but who knows? But yeah, just like not a lot of success here at the bottom of the picks like we always see. And so I'd say kind of poor champion pool discipline. I don't know what role they're playing. Were they playing Kale in mid? But I mean, you can see they're playing a lot of games in different roles, right? Like, they're playing Zyra jungle, they're playing mid. I assume some of these games are going to be support. This is 80 carry. So I assume some of these Lux and Morgana games maybe are even support. But maybe not. Actually, I haven't seen one yet. Yeah, here's like a Lux game support. Teemo game top with Grasp going 0-5. I mean, you get the idea, right? Like, if these people tighten up their champion pool, This person's very close to getting platinum. They're literally a couple of games off of getting platinum. If this person hadn't played 45 games of TF with a 40% win rate, they were a little bit less of a KDA player and maybe doing a little bit more damage, having a little bit more impact in their games. If they were getting more than 5 CS per minute, this player would easily be platinum, or higher. So, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here we've got a guy who's playing a lot of Smolder right now in his match history. Oh, maybe just last 4 games. So this guy looks legit. I mean, he's level 317, so he's the highest level person we've looked at so far. He's got a 55% win rate on Kai'Sa, 50% win rate on Caitlyn, mostly just one-tricking Kai'Sa. Huge fall off in games between Kai'Sa and Caitlyn. And then, Jhin, 34% win rate, dying 8.3 times a game. Lucian, only 19 games played, doing pretty decently with it, but only 19 games played. So huge drop off here from like the Kai'Sa to the Caitlyn, even from the Caitlyn to the Lucian. And then we're getting into again, less than 20 games played, very low sample size. Sorry, that's someone inviting me on my client. Sorry if I baited you guys with that. And then we've got, if we go in here, again, a lot of losses at the bottom here. And so again, this is a guy that really should probably just be sticking to playing Kai'Sa and Caitlyn, maybe Lucian, right? Maybe Jinx or Ezreal, right? Maybe you could make a case for a couple of those champions depending on how they do if they keep playing them out. But probably should just stick to a couple of champions here. But whatever was happening here with either learning Jhin or testing that as part of the champion pool was not successful. So now we see another player that had ended up getting to Emerald. So maybe we'll go back and look at their history. This is something I talked about right in the recent video, like why a lot of people went to Emerald and then are suddenly no longer in Emerald. But the reality is that if you've got a player who's capable of winning 55% of their games on their main, my guess is that when we go back a couple of splits here and look at the split that they were going to Emerald, let's take a look. So they went to Emerald in 2023 split 2. So let's make sure we're there. Yeah, so this was right. They were winning 59% of their games on Vayne. Still not so good at the end here. I wish it was so easy to see total win rate and stuff like that. Because I mean, they didn't do too well on Kai'Sa. They were pretty positive, 20 games or so positive on Vayne, but then negative again on Ezreal. And then I'm sure they're going to fall off hard here with a negative win rate on Varus and on Jhin and Samira. And then, you're getting into barely any games played. And then a lot of losses, of course, on first time champions at the bottom of the match history. So what really changed here? Maybe let's go back and look at the season before when they actually climbed, because this doesn't really mean anything. So let's look at, we'll go back one more split before that, see if we can make sense of what's happening here. So again, 57% win rate on Kai'Sa, 60% on Ezreal, 58% on Jinx. And I'm not surprised. We just pointed out that these were champions they seem to have been doing well on. 54% on Samira. So this person's got a tight champion pool that's doing really well. Again, probably way too many unique champions played at 62. A lot of lost first pick games, way more than wins on first pick champions. You're probably only winning 1/3 of these games down here where you're picking the champion a few times. 0 and 7 on Aphelios. That's a really complicated AD carry you probably don't want to be playing if you don't know what you're doing and you're in gold. But obviously they made some progress and climbed here with the 60% win rate. They get into Emerald, doing well here with Vayne again, but kind of not so good on some other things. And then just I don't know. I'd have to look at champion totals, but I'm actually kind of confused. I mean, they're definitely stagnant here now, this split. And we know that they're sitting stagnant at 49% or whatever, partially because of the fact that they, that they're not playing only Kai'Sa and Caitlyn. They're losing all these games on Jhin and stuff like that. But if you've got over 100 games played with a 55% win rate on that champion, if you one tricked this champion, this player would just have a 55% win rate instead of a 49% win rate, and then they'd be in platinum instead of in gold. But yeah, definitely something weird here. I mean, I can't really tell. This relates to that previous video. Like I said, I can't really tell, to be honest with you, what this player, even in terms of win rate, was doing differently, because it looks like they've had consistently, we'd have to add it up to look at the numbers to be certain, but it looks like they've pretty consistently had some champions that they're winning, 60% of their games on. This was in the split that they were before they got to Emerald, actually. This was in the one where they got to Gold 2. But then they get to Emerald 3 in a pretty unassuming, like, generic split where they win 50% of their games on their most played champion. They go like positive 20 on Vayne, but negative 16 on Ezreal. So they're positive like maybe 4 or 5 games when they get to champion number 3. And I just can't imagine that you go down this list and find a very positive win rate. I mean, if we, so they're positive 1, and then, I mean, let's just add it up because it's so weird, right? But it relates to the previous video I was talking about before, where I essentially think that Riot was trying to shift the distribution upward, and there was a lot of mistakes that were made with the implementation. First off, a lot of players straight up placed into Emerald when they just shouldn't have. And those accounts that straight up placed into Emerald kind of became doomed because the players weren't capable of playing there, and then ended up like slowly demoting over time. And a lot of these players quit because it doesn't feel good and it's not natural. Like when we look at my climb, which happened in older seasons, right, before this shenanigans, there was not like a period of time where I went way up and way down. Like the worst swing that you saw was like where I was kind of a player who was like hard stuck in like Diamond 5 or high platinum, and then I would like demote to the end, like to platinum 5 or something like that, or platinum 4 at the end of the season if I finished the season on a bad slide or something like that. But that's the worst that you would see, is like down 1 rank. To see a player like this go from Emerald down consistently to plat 1 split, and then down to gold the next split, even while playing 300 games. And I'm not seeing anything particularly crazy. I mean, I can't see the totals, we'll have to add them up, but I can't see the difference really in these splits. Like, I'm just, my brief observation of the numbers is that like it looks like they're winning about the same percentage of games each split. So I don't really know what's going on here. So let's add them up. Let's start with the previous one. So we know that this person has 3 splits that are of interest. Gold 2, right, when they were in 2023 split 1. Then they got to Emerald, which was their peak, around the same split that a lot of people got to Emerald, which is when Emerald was introduced into the game in 2023 split 1, or I mean split 2. And then they went down to platinum, so down a whole rank the next split, and now they've gone down a whole rank again this split, even while playing a decent number of games. So let's kind of add up some win losses there and see what happens. So this was their gold split. So let's just add up the wins here. They went 47, 40, 21, 19, 16, 13, 14, 11, 7, 8, 7, 4, 7, 3, 3. They didn't get any wins on Aphelios here. 4, 3, 3, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1. You're going to love this in the comments, I know. 1, 1, 1. Uh-oh. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's just call that 12. That's a lot easier. I'm not going to add 1 over and over again that many times. And then that's it. Okay, so they went 259. Now let's add up the losses. 36, 27, 15, 16, 19, 14, 11, 9, 9, 7, 7, 6, 1, 5. 4, and then that 0 and 7 Aphelios gets me every time. It's a nice little break here while I'm adding these up. 1, 2, 2, 4, 3, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2. And then we got all the losses at the bottom here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 losses at the end here. Okay, so the player went 259 and 237. So that's a total of 496 games. So 259 divided by 496 is a 52.21% or 52.22% win rate. So they're winning about 52% of their games, right? And that makes sense. So they played a ton of games, nearly 500 ranked games. They went from gold 4 to gold 2 with a barely positive 52% win rate. So now what I'm curious about is they went suddenly from gold 2 to emerald 3, so up 2 ranks basically. On what I see is a very similar win rate. So we'll see if that's the case or whether their win rate was much higher. So now Emerald's introduced into the game. And to give the context, even though I have talked about this in a previous video, there's a lot of reasons why I believe this might be the case. I think that Riot screwed up when they implemented Emerald into the game. I think a lot of players coming out of their placements were suddenly just placing into Emerald on new accounts, on old accounts. It was just all kinds of screwed up. And a lot of players, like potentially this player, basically played consistently the whole time, but were suddenly thrown into Emerald, and then now all of a sudden they're like demoting back down to Plat or demoting back down to Gold as the distribution changes. Riot's goal was to move people from like Bronze and Silver and Gold up into like Platinum and Emerald. Well, not all the way from Silver, but like Silver players up into like Gold and Platinum, and Bronze players up into Silver, and Gold players into like Platinum and Emerald, and Platinum players into Emerald. And then on the upper end, they wanted to shift things down. So they wanted Diamond players going into Emerald, especially like the hard stuck Diamond 4 players going into Emerald. So back where I was, right, when we're talking about like me being stuck in high Platinum and low Diamond back then, would be the equivalent of like being stuck in Emerald today. That's where they wanted those players who were like hard stuck low Diamond players. Then they also wanted Master players, because there's like 7,000, like way too many low Master players. They wanted a lot of low Master players moving into like high Diamond, because there's a big difference there as well, and like too many players in low Masters. So that being said, they were trying to shift that distribution, right? So I think a lot of the reason why we see bigger slides today is because if a player is doing worse, so let's say that this player won only 40% of their ranked games or something and actually started doing worse, bad champion pool discipline, maybe, took a break and stopped playing as many games or started doing worse. Not saying that that's the case with this player. That's why this player is kind of a curious case, and we're kind of deep diving into this guy. But for a lot of players, right, it's like they start playing worse, and if they go on that big losing streak, or what I call a slide is like, it's not necessarily losing every single game in a row, but you go on a long period, it could even be over 2 weeks or even over a month or something like that, where you just like lose way more than you win. You're having a terrible time and everything sucks, and you're going on a slide. You're losing a lot of LP, right? I talk about when I lost 700 LP and went from like Masters 300 LP to Diamond 4, and then had to recover. And it took like a month to recover the account's MMR, to start winning more than I was losing, to adjust down to the level of play and the unreliability of my teammates in Diamond 4 compared to Masters 300 LP. And then I managed to climb all the way back. But it takes a lot of time, and it sucks, because if you have a bad stretch, whether it's because you're playing bad or you're unlucky, or usually a bad stretch like that has to be a combination of both. Like everything's going wrong for you. Bad champion pool discipline, like losing faith in your champion, you doing worse, maybe you not doing so well IRL, a lot of things bothering you, etc. All this stuff piled up, plus a little bit of unlucky games and stuff like that at the worst possible time, leads to these worst slides that you've ever had in your league journey, right? And it's like, one of the problems is that it's quicker if you have that happen to your account. You'll hear people like Tyler One say, well, like, I guess this account's MMR is doomed, time to switch accounts. Because if you got another high elo account anyways, it's just quicker to hop onto an account that was also Masters last season or was also Diamond last season and climb that account to Masters. It's quicker to do that at a high win rate with good MMR, like, winning lots of games, feeling good, starting with, high win rate and stuff, because you're kind of smurfing a little bit and playing at a little bit of a lower rank. It's easier to do that and get back to your peak than it is to play 300, 400 games to fix the MMR of an account and slowly climb back to where you were. Well, maybe not 300, 400 games, but usually on a really big slide like minus 700 LP, it could take 200 games to fix the MMR of your account and climb back to where you were before. Well, in 200 games on a new account, I can get a new account to Masters. So, that's kind of the issue there. But that's a separate problem. So they changed the distribution, right? They were shifting all these players up, but they didn't quite get there. So we talked about this. The expectation was to shift things that way, but more players stayed in iron, bronze, and silver than they expected and anticipated or wanted to have happen right away. And that, there's some reasons why I think that's the case. I think a lot of people not playing enough. I think too many ranked resets keeping people lower because they're, not able to play enough to actually get to where the distribution wants players distributed. And I think that, like, banning all those bot accounts, some of which were playing in ranked games in like iron and bronze and stuff like that, probably pulled players backwards as well, right? Like we've talked about. But other issues as well, like, so that's what kind of pulled players back a little bit. And so you would expect some of that backlash as well. But a lot of people were saying, hey, I think Riot adjusted how many people were in Emerald, because it looks like a lot of people went into Emerald and then all of a sudden went out. And it all happened this same split that Emerald was introduced. And so I don't know whether they messed up, like all these new accounts were just always placing into like Platinum and Emerald. And so there were like way more Emerald accounts than there should have been. And then those players got stuck and frustrated and in some cases quit the game, which is a disaster. So I don't know if that happened. I don't know if even accounts that were previously ranked, like this account wasn't a new account when Emerald was introduced. It was in gold for 2 splits. And then it was in platinum, or no. Then it got to Emerald when Emerald was introduced. Then it went back to platinum. Now it's back to gold. So what happened there, right? And so my explanation for understanding this has been that, like, if the distribution is shaped so that platinum used to be the top 15% of players, and now platinum's the top 40% of players, sliding from platinum to silver, let's say, which was a huge drop before. Before that would have been like the equivalent of dropping from like the 15th percentile to the 60th percentile. But nowadays it's like the equivalent of dropping from the 40th percentile to the 60th percentile. So because that's the case, you would expect like a player demoting from like Emerald to Gold to be more common than it used to be, because they're demoting the same percentile of players, or they're demoting past the same number of players basically, or the same percentage of players. And so I thought that just with silver and gold and platinum and emerald being more evenly distributed and closer together in skill level than ever before, that it'd be understandable that if a player started doing bad and went on a long-term slide, that they would go from platinum to silver or from emerald to gold, and that would be a possibility. And even though we haven't seen that before, and even though that would be a surprise to us in terms of how much they lost in face rank, it wouldn't be like crazy to imagine that happening in the current system, given the way they were trying to distribute things. But I'm looking at a player like this, and we're going to dive into this. We've got their first season calculated out here. So they went from gold 4 to gold 2 on a 52% win rate. I'm not seeing why this player should have demoted from emerald to gold, but maybe when we get through the numbers, we'll see here. So now we've got another split for this player. So 83 wins, 58 wins, 30, 29, 18, 15, 10, 11, 3, 1, 4, 3, 3. Then we've got Ash here with 2. Yasuo with 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2. And then we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins here at the end. So they had 289 wins, similar number of games to the previous split. So we'll see here how many losses: 82, 41, 46, 28, 15, 10, 11, 7, 6, 7, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. And then at the end here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 losses. Okay, so they went 200 and... Whoa, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so this player, right, went 289 and 290. So they went negative one game on like almost 600 games played, like 580 games played. And they went from gold 2 to emerald 2 when emerald was introduced to the game. Not on a new account, but on an account that had already existed. They went to emerald 2 with a 50% win rate, basically flat. That doesn't make any sense. That's not good, Riot. That's not good. So let's think about that for a second. So they were gold 2 before. So let's take a look at the chart. Emerald ranked distribution, whatever. I must be tired. Okay, here we go. We found something. Okay, yeah, this is the one I wanted to see. So did gold players, like a gold 2 player, where was a gold 2 player supposed to land? Okay, fair enough. So this is what happened. Even though the player was same skill level, winning the same percentage of their games, Riot intended for a gold 2 player, which is like this top of gold here. This would be like gold 1. This would be like gold 2, maybe a little bit in here. They intended for them to end up in emerald. That being said, even with that, to go all the way to emerald 2 should be up here. So for a gold 2 player to be all the way up here with just a 50% win rate was an overshoot, to say the least, right? Like, that's not where they were supposed to end up. That's not right. Okay, so then what happens, right? Okay, so curious, right? So most of them being in emerald with a 50% win rate could be attributed to the fact that obviously Riot tried to shift bronze players into bronze and silver players into silver, gold, and platinum, gold players into platinum and emerald, and like platinum players into emerald, and some like diamond players into emerald that were like diamond 4 hard stuck players, and then like some low master players into diamond, right? So that makes sense. A little bit of an overshoot, right? Not exactly what their expectation was, but within what maybe we would expect with them trying to do this. So are we looking at Fizzlev? Yeah. Okay, so then what happens the next split? Because this is interesting, because this will tell us a lot right here. Because the next split is when this guy goes from emerald 3 to platinum 2. Now, the only way this guy is going to demote a whole rank, and then this split, obviously he's played another 300 games and yet he's in gold 1. So the only way this guy's going to demote a whole rank or a whole 2 ranks is if he's got a negative win rate. If he does not have a negative win rate, which I didn't see that any of his splits were any different. Looked like every split he was about a 50% win rate. If this guy did not have a seriously negative season in like this year, in split 1 and split 2 of this year, the only explanation for him going down from emerald 3, oh, he didn't get to emerald 2, he got to emerald 3. Okay, that's even more in line with what we'd expect. And also it was emerald 3 0 P too. So like the very bottom of emerald 3. So that's even more in line with, you know, maybe this is emerald 1, maybe this is emerald 2, maybe emerald 3 does dip down into gold a little bit here. So that's fine. But this is important because a lot of people were saying, and I didn't necessarily believe, that Riot had maybe adjusted backwards, and I hadn't seen any proof of that. So if this player did not have a significantly negative win rate, if they did not lose more games than they won over these two splits, then there's no reason for them to go to from Emerald 3 to Gold 1 unless Riot significantly adjusted the rank system to pull people back towards the previous distribution. So like, rather than this, we've seen this chart before, rather than their expectation and goal of Split 2, maybe they pulled it back towards more like what we had in the past. And that's why we see so many people doing that. So what happened to this guy in Split 1 and Split 2 of this year? Did he really lose that many more games than he won? Or did Riot just adjust the ranked ladder back to more of a previous distribution? So we got 79, 29, 30, 22, 17, 16, 8, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 2. And then we've got 6 games here at the end that he won. So that's 236 wins. What has he got for losses this first split of the year? 5, 8, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 3, 1, 3 on the Samira here. And then we've got 3, 3, 1, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 losses and a partridge in a pear tree. So we've got, so he's got 236 wins and 241 losses. So he did go -5 games, but that's not that much, right? Like, that's -5 games should lose you a division, right? Maybe 2 divisions, especially given the new rank distribution, right? So let's be generous to Riot here and say he went 2 divisions, but he didn't go 2 divisions down. He went a whole rank down. Hold on, I'm trying to do some really good coping for Riot here and figure out. Now, imagine that his ranked gets reset and he's in Platinum. His ranked gets reset. Imagine this. His ranked gets reset. He's in Platinum. And he starts losing more than he's winning in Platinum. So he starts out very negative to the season. And then after starting out very negative, he basically just wins 50% of his games from there on in. So for example, imagine that the player was Emerald 3 0 LP, but then placed into like Platinum 4 and lost his first 10 games in a row, and his first 50 games he still had a negative win rate. His first 100 games he still had a negative win rate just by a couple of games. And then he just won 50% of his games for the rest of the split. And so his MMR was a little bit shot. He lost 5 more than he won, which could account for maybe 1 or 2 divisions, which would have put him at, instead of Emerald 3, would put him at Emerald 4, maybe Platinum 1. He ended up in Platinum 2. That's really not that bad. So especially if he had like a rough start to the split, when his MMR was higher, if he was playing in those Emerald games and losing more than he was winning, but then winning more than he was losing when he was playing in Platinum Elo games, then he'd still be stuck in Platinum, and it would make sense. He only really went down about, because he ended Plat 2 instead of Emerald 3, he really only went down about like 3 divisions instead of 2, and he did go -5 on... How many games was he -5 on? on 477 games. So it's totally possible, depending on when those wins and losses were, that that would be the case. But luckily, we have a second split to look at here. So now how does the player go from Platinum 2 to Gold 1? Well, we can already see here, actually. He is -5 again. But, so he's going down another 3 divisions for going -5. Or he's -6, I guess. Yeah, honestly, I'm going to stick with what I said before. I just think that, like, the slides are bigger than people would expect because of the new rank distribution. I don't think that anything crazy is going on here. Like, essentially, the player is losing 3 divisions, right? They went up from Gold 2 to Emerald 3 when they were winning 50% of their games because Riot shifted the rank distribution so heavily. So you have a player who went from Gold 4 to Gold 2 while they were winning 52% of their games. Then while winning 50% of their games, I think they went like +1 game. They went from Gold 2 to Emerald 3 because Riot shifted that distribution up into Emerald. But then they get placed and they go -5 on like 500 games, and they go from Emerald 3 down to Platinum 2. And then they go -6 on 300 games, and they go from Plat 2 to Gold 1. And that sounds bad because 5 or 6 games shouldn't represent 3 divisions. But especially if you have a ranked reset, which is going to take you down multiple divisions anyways, and then you're not winning at the rank that you're playing at, you're going to stay stuck after the reset. And so the reality is that they push this guy up into Emerald. Oh, okay. I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to get what may be happening here too. So here's the problem, right? Here's the problem. Let's go back to this chart. This is a big piece of the problem. When you stick a diamond player, okay, of old, against a gold player of old, right? In the old distribution, the diamond player is going to destroy the gold player. There was a clear difference between a diamond player and a gold player. Even between a platinum player and a gold player. I think what happened here is that Riot took a guy like this, right? He's the perfect example, who was winning 52% of their games, going from Gold 4 to Gold 2. Very similar to my climb, right? Very similar, slow grind, even if you're slightly positive, over hundreds of games to get to the next rank kind of thing. Then they make all these changes. And the guy, even while just barely being positive, goes from Gold to Emerald. But when the guy gets to Emerald, he now can no longer win 52% of his games. He can't even win 50% of his games. Instead, he's going -5 or -6 and winning 49% of his games. And why is he winning 48 or 49% of his games? Because he's matched against a bunch of diamond players and a bunch of platinum players that he's unable to compete with. And so what happens? A lot of the players who moved into Emerald, who were gold, right, got out-competed by the platinum and the diamond players. They won 48, 49% of their games. And then when the ranked reset happened, a player who was solidly a gold player, when they were put back in platinum, guess what happens? They start winning 50% of their games against other gold players in platinum. And they end up stuck in plat. Now, in this guy's case in particular, he may have also had some poor champion pool discipline, right? Like we've been talking about, to get back to the main topic, such as winning 34% of his games on 29 games played on his third most played champion on Jhin. And that may have resulted in him doing even worse, and not only not competing against gold player, or platinum and diamond players when he was put into Emerald initially, but also not being able to even compete against like other gold players in platinum, and finding himself, right here, basically like the equivalent of having demoted from like Gold 4 to like Silver 1 or something like that, or silver. You know, that's normal. You know, that happens to people. People have bad champion pool discipline, are having a rough split, or doing worse than they were in the past. Maybe you're demoralized from having been beaten up for a split on by platinum and diamond players. And he has another rough split, and he ends up losing 6 more than he wins. And for now, he's demoted a division or two compared to where he was before, from being like a low platinum player to being like a high silver player. And he can turn it around with better champion pool discipline and getting better at the game, but it feels bad because the thing is, when we went through my match history and my experience climbing, I got to enjoy, even though I was stuck for a period of time, it was basically my fault that I was stuck, right? It wasn't some manipulation of the ranked ladder. It was like I got to experience a nice climb upwards. Yes, it took thousands of games, even 10,000 games to get to GM, but it was a nice slow climb upward where I was like winning more than I was losing on my main champions. And really the biggest issue for me was champion pool discipline. These players, yes, they need the champion pool discipline. Yes, you need to focus on that in order to climb. Yes, you need to get better at the game in order to climb. But it feels bad to be suddenly artificially inflated to emerald and then pulled right back down to platinum or gold. Because you're getting beat up on by platinum players in emerald and not actually able to hold your own, or even diamond players in emerald. So, and Smurfs, right, who are going to make up some of the bulk of the players you're playing against as well. So it feels a lot worse. Whereas like when I'm playing through silver and gold in season 3 and season 4, not the same percentage of Smurfs playing in there at all. And Riot doesn't release Smurfing statistics. They don't ban Smurfing. And they got to get their dirty little fingers in messing with the rank system instead of just keeping it a slow grind. And I don't think it's smart. People say that it's like engagement based, or that it's trying to get you to play more games. The system before, where you slowly made progress over thousands of games, was the system that kept you playing a ton of games. A lot of players like this who played 300 games and then just to demote a whole rank, because they lost 5 more than they won, because they were playing against platinum players in emerald all of a sudden when they should be playing against gold players in gold. Those players are going to have such a bad time that that of course they're gonna quit the game, and that's not good for Riot. It's just incompetence at the end of the day. Okay, so we kind of see what happened to this guy, right? Like he was a gold player in gold 4 under the old distribution. So he was like here. And then emerald was introduced, and this was Riot's target, to push bronze, silver, and gold players up so that there were a bunch of players in platinum and emerald. And so what we see here is that essentially the shift would have moved a gold player like him. Oh, well, so first off, before this change happened, he climbed from gold 4 like here to like gold 2 like here. But we can see that it would have taken a gold 2 player like him to like low emerald, which it did. So that's expected. It's expected that even though he won 50% of his games, he would shoot up to emerald, because that's what Riot tried to do. The problem is that if you just shoot a bunch of gold players into emerald with a bunch of platinum and diamond players, the gold players are going to get a lot of pushback. In fact, even if Riot has set up the distribution so that there's supposed to be a certain percentage of players in emerald, if there's a big enough skill gap between these players in emerald and these players in emerald, these players won't stay in emerald. They'll just lose and get knocked out. So maybe part of the reason why the distribution is not working out the way Riot wants is because there's just too big of an actual skill gap between like silver and gold and platinum and diamond, or what used to be those players. Now then, he loses 5 more than he wins, and he demotes from like emerald 3, which is in like here, to platinum 2, which is like here, which is fine. Like he's still within where, he's still a gold player, playing at like a 49% win rate, going slightly lower in gold. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And then him demoting to gold 1, would put him here, which is the equivalent of, this slide from gold 1 to, or from from Platinum 2 to Gold 1 for this player represents like him going from being like a middling gold player to having played 300 games and losing 6 more than he won, and going to being like a high silver, like a silver 2 or a silver 1 player. And I don't think a lot of people would say it's unreasonable that if the guy played 300 games and lost 6 more than he won and had bad champion pool discipline and is not doing well and losing, all of his games on Jin, and going 0-7 on Affilios, it's not really a big surprise that the guy is going to wind up demoting from Gold 2 to like Silver 2. Was the biggest real slide in old ranks. In terms of old ranks, he had promoted to Gold 2. Emerald 3 or Emerald 4 for him was just the equivalent of the old Gold 2. And then he demoted from, what was the old Gold 2 to what is like, what is essentially the equivalent of like the old Silver 1 or Silver 2, or in the new system is like Gold 1. It just looks like a bigger slide because he slid from Emerald to Gold, but in the old system he just slid from Gold 2 to Silver 1 or Silver 2 on like literally 800 games, -11. So that's totally reasonable. I don't think that there's anything crazy here. I just think that that's what I think does suck, is that Riot just randomly devalued what it meant to be Platinum and Emerald by shifting the rank distribution way up, and then gave these players this like false hope or false sense of improvement that they had climbed all the way to being the same as like these Diamond 4 players. And then these Diamond 4 players like crush them in their games. They don't feel like they have fair matchmaking, and they end up losing over and over and over again. And so it's not this consistent climb that I had where you're winning 52, 55, 57% of your games over a couple hundred games. It's like, no, you're getting crushed by Platinum and Diamond players you should never been playing against as a gold player. And so you're winning 49, 48% of your games and having a hard time, staying where you're at. On top of that, they banned the bot accounts in Iron and Bronze, like I said, so that probably pulled people back in the distribution a little bit as well at all ranks. So just, tough time to be a player in a rank that suddenly pushed up and then pulled back down. It just doesn't feel right. And look, a lot of players that Riot did this to straight up quit the game, and Riot's kind of killing their game by messing with it like this. Not good. I get where the appeal comes from. I've thought that it's disingenuous that other games, like I played Halo for a little bit with my friends, like very, very little bit. I don't even remember which Halo it was, but there was a Halo that came out, and I had never played Halo before, and I played a little bit of Halo with them, and I got ranked like Platinum. And I was kind of confused because I was like, how am I getting placed in Platinum in Halo? I don't even play the game, right? Like, shouldn't I be starting out like Bronze or Silver? You go and play another game like Apex Legends or something like that. And so I started looking up, because you can look up these rank distributions. If you look up the rank distribution for like Apex Legends or like Halo or like Overwatch even or something like that, their rank distributions are kind of Mickey Mouse compared to League, meaning that their rank distributions have way more players in the equivalent of like Platinum, Emerald, and Diamond, and way less players in the low ranks. Whereas games like League and CSGO too, historically, had very, very skewed rank systems, meaning that like it was okay that the majority of the player base was stuck in like Bronze and Silver, because the majority of the player base was actually like that much worse compared to the rest of the people who had been playing the game for 10 or 20 years. And so it wasn't an unfair system or an unfair distribution. It was just the representative of the reality of the situation. But I felt like it was unfair to League, because if a player plays Apex Legends or plays Halo and gets Platinum or gets Diamond and thinks, hey, I'm really good at Halo, or I'm really good at Apex Legends, maybe I should main this game, maybe I can be a streamer, maybe I can go pro, maybe I can be a YouTuber or something at this game, even though they're the same percentile as they would be as if they were like a gold player in League, I think that that's a disingenuous way to like trick people into maining a game. And so I think one reason behind the scenes from a game developer perspective, why Riot wanted to shift this distribution, is because they wanted people to feel like they were good at League so that they keep playing League. But what they did instead is they messed with who people were playing against within their rank, causing people to basically stagnate for 3 splits or like a year and a half or 2 years after, or even not just stagnate, but to go down after having been promoted a lot all of a sudden. And it makes it feel to everyone at that rank like, wait a second, I put in all this hard work, like we just saw with this player as an example. I went from gold 4 to gold 2, winning 52% of my games over hundreds of games. But then suddenly I go from gold 2 to emerald 3, only winning 50% of my games. If you don't understand all the nuance that's going on behind the scenes with the rank distribution, you're just thinking like ranked in league is completely meaningless and doesn't matter. So it's no wonder why they've created this perception among so many low elo players that something's just completely wrong. And then you have like plat 2, this guy sliding to plat 2. Now he's feeling like the worst feeling in the world. Like, now I've gone to plat 2 from emerald 3. Now I've gone from emerald 3 to gold 1. And I'm playing hundreds of games, and it's like I could make a new account and maybe I would place into platinum. So why keep playing on my main account? Or like, how could I have gone from Emerald 3 to Gold 1? There must be something wrong with the rank system. Even though we know in reality, having checked the guy's match history, he did go negative 11 games on 800 games played. But why did he even go negative 11 games on 800 games played in the first place? It's because Riot messed with the rank distribution and put him up against players he wasn't ready to play against yet. Had he played during season 3, season 4, when I was climbing through gold, this guy would have won 53% of his games over his 800 games, playing against other gold players, maybe starting to play against some platinum players. He would have slowly climbed and been enjoying his time playing the game. He wouldn't have felt the need to quit or get another account. Now, this guy hasn't actually quit or anything like that, but there's a lot of people like this that basically are or have, right? And I mean, he hasn't played in 8 days at all, right? And so you do wonder if he's going on to another account, if he has kind of started quitting the game. Certainly in every other season or every other split, he's certainly played 500 games, and then this split he's like at what, 240. So he's not playing as much as he used to, and it's probably a result of feeling like all of his progress was stripped away, or maybe his progress that he made was fake and artificial and didn't matter in the first place, and so that just all feels really bad. So anyways, kind of a side tangent on what happened with the rank distribution, but back to building your champion pool and champion pool discipline. Let's finish up some of these op.gg's maybe more quickly than some of these other players. So we have a similar thing here. We have a bronze 2 player, went to silver 3, went to gold 3, and you see a similar pullback, right? So this player was pushed up into gold from silver, probably regardless of, probably even if they were winning about 50% of their games, and then went back to silver 2. Now the players made some improvement and got into a new peak, got into gold 1. So this guy looks like a bit of a Katarina one trick. He's got a decent second champion actually in Nefiri as well, so that's good. So he's got 53% on a good number of games on Katarina, 55% on a good number of games on Nefiri. Did well on Tom Kench for 30 games. So that's pretty good. And then you start to see a fall off, right? Like, okay, but not so great Xerath, looking at adding that to the champion pool or something, right? Not going perfectly, not going terribly. And then we fall off to like 6 games played or less. Not bad. Like, again, these guys have better champion pool discipline than when I was playing back in the day. But let's see, what do we got here? So we've got like 22 unique champions. Obviously, again, we're dropping a lot more games. Like, start with Malzahar here. We're dropping a lot more games here. For no reason than we need to. We could be, at 54% or a 55% win rate if we just don't play those games. But the guy's obviously having success, sticking to just a couple of champions, really 3 main champions that he's climbing with here, and appropriately not playing as many games on other champions. And so he's climbing as a result with the 52% win rate. So it seems decent here. Okay, so now we've got another guy here. Again, same thing. They went from being a bronze player. I mean, they only went up 1 division actually, but they did end up going to silver 4. Now they're in gold 1. I wonder if that's part of the distribution shift as well. It's just maybe they didn't play so much in this last split, I wonder. Yeah, they didn't play hardly at all. So I think a lot of the bump up that this guy would have experienced going from like high bronze or low silver to gold is happening this split for this player. And that's a lot of what I'm talking about. Why is the distribution not lining up yet with what Riot expected? A lot of low elo players don't play that many ranked games or don't play the game that much. Um, so it's taking a little while, but now this player's bumped up from like silver to gold. As far as their win rate, really no crazy win rate that would suggest that they should go up all the way from bronze 1 to gold 1, really winning 51% of their games or so. And this player seems to have like some champion pool. It's hard to tell because they've got a really low number of games played, really low sample size, but very high level. So it is a main account. Doing well on the Seraphine and the Nami, not doing well on the Lux, doing well on Soraka, not doing well on Sona. So we're all over the place here, right? Now we're into a different role, another different role. So again, probably like actually did really well on the Ari, but probably shouldn't be playing these auto-filled games. I wonder if the Ari is like a boost actually. 5-0 with really crazy KD. Not recent enough. The Ari games aren't recent enough to tell. I mean, that's really, the R games are actually a little bit suspicious, but it is a small sample size. Let's look at the CS per minute. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. 6.4 is not that crazy. Pretty decent for someone who realistically should be like bronze 1 or silver 4 though. It's really hard to say with a person like this because they really just don't play the game enough to climb, right? Like they've basically just been stuck at the same rank. The only reason why they're in gold is because of the distribution shift. They've basically been winning about 50% of their games since. They would have like a 54 or 55% win rate if they were just sticking to Seraphine and Nami, but of course they're losing a lot of games on other random champions in ranked like we see on every account. But it's hard to say because we don't really know whether like Soraka should be part of this Seraphine and Nami pool, or Ari, if this is legitimately this person playing Ari. We don't know if this person should be maybe even switching to mid or something like that because there's just not enough of a sample size, not enough games played to know. But yeah, obviously, this person maybe should stick to these two champions, definitely drop Lux, that kind of thing. Okay, here we have another situation, right? Again, Split 2, Season 13. Emerald added into the game. Player shoots up from Silver 3 to Platinum 4. And then they get stuck in Platinum 4 for 2 splits. And now they're in Gold 1, which is very close to Platinum 4. It's only one division down. They're only 3 games negative. But again, this is a player who in previous iterations of the way ranked worked, like when I was climbing back in the day, probably wouldn't be stuck all of a sudden. Definitely wouldn't have shot up from silver to platinum for no reason at 50% win rate. Definitely wouldn't be stuck in gold 1 after 3 splits of playing. Probably what would have happened is they'd be progressively slowly climbing. I'm sure that this player, like a lot of players who have played a lot of ranked, now that the distribution's starting to settle, I bet that this player is going to make a comeback the next split. I bet things will be better and they're going to start seeing the ability to climb again now that they've gone down in rank a little bit. But it feels really bad to be stagnant for like a year and a half just because Riot messed with the distribution. I mean, I guess you could say they're not stagnant because they went up a whole rank or almost 2 ranks, right? But okay, so let's look at this player's champion pool. They're winning 50% overall, which doesn't make sense because they've got a 59% win rate on Darius and they've got a 52% win rate on Akali. This person looks like they're splitting between playing like every role in the game though. Can we see like where are they playing Akali? Is it mid lane? It is mid lane. So they've got one champion they're playing top lane, one champion they're playing mid lane, one champion they're playing support. God forbid it's Brand jungle. We can't tell. But yeah, obviously you're not going to climb as fast if you're playing 3 different roles. And he seems to be having so much success in top on Darius that if he really enjoys playing the champion, of course, he should probably just stick to maining that. Lot of unique champions played, 50 unique champions played. Again, big negative, win rate and a lot of LP and MMR being lost to these like last half of the unique picks in ranked, need to tighten up on the champion pool picks in ranked, playing too many different roles. All the same things that we've seen me slowly learn over the course of my climb, that hey, I can't be playing 20, 30, 60 games of jungle a season and 20 games of top and 20 games of mid. I need to just be playing support. I'll have a much better win rate. I'll be able to spend more time actually learning my role. Etc. I don't need to have 50 unique support champions. Even if I was just playing sport, I don't need to have 50 unique support champions tried in a split. I can just have 5 that I go into the split knowing that I'm willing to play, and maybe another 5 or 10 come up through the course of the split, become meta or champions I'm interested in trying out, and I'm actually willing to put in 5, 10, maybe 20 plus games on the champion in order to see how it goes. Maybe I abandon them after 5 or 6 games or so, and I understand that that's going to take a hit in order to try to bring those champions into my pool, or give me the option to play those champions. I understand that that's going to take a small hit to my rank, but it's worth it to, maybe to me, especially if I'm at a certain rank or I'm trying to get on a team or something to improve my champion pool. So, that's where it's at. Okay, so now we're into the interesting stuff, because now we're into people who posted in my Discord server for the YouTube channel. So these are guys that potentially I'll do coaching on, or at least they'll have this as some helpful, advice. So when it comes to champion pool, let's take a look at this player too. We have to look at what's happening every single account, by the way, with this shift in the rank distribution. Gold 3 jumps up to Emerald 4, right? So just skips Plat right into Emerald. When Emerald, all season 13 Split 2, all when Emerald's introduced. And since being in Emerald 4, they actually managed to do better than a lot of people. And they actually managed to hold Emerald, in fact, go up 2 divisions in Emerald. And they have been a little bit stagnant, so they're at Emerald 3. They're a little bit hard stuck. In fact, we see the same thing as some of these other accounts, right? They went to Emerald 2, now they're at Emerald 3, almost down in Emerald 4. They got a 49% win rate, -7 games. I hope it gets better for you next split, bud. This is really, I'm sorry that Riot did this and ruined the ranked ladder for all of you guys. It's really gross compared to what my climb was like, to be honest. It's really frustrating, right? Because I genuinely love League of Legends, right? I wouldn't spend so much time talking about it, making content about it, playing the game if I didn't really care about it, especially at this point in my life when it's not maybe something that makes so much sense for me to do anymore. But I genuinely care about the game. And to see the number of players in NA dropping off like crazy because people are quitting because they're just stuck in ranked for no reason, because they decided to mess with the distribution instead of just leaving the thing alone and letting people slowly work on climbing. And if people got frustrated that they were stuck and not climbing, those people were always going to quit a competitive game. There are certain people do not like team games, do not like team sports, or do not like having to actually improve and climb, not willing to accept responsibility. And a lot of those people are not going to keep playing the game. Or they won't climb, but they'll still keep playing the game because they like the game and they like the champions and stuff like that, whatever. A lot of those people, you just have to let them go. But when you mess with the rank distribution like this, and then everyone from silver to plat, from silver to emerald, are all stuck for 3 splits sorting everything out, either winning 49% of their games and getting demoted back to where they should be, or not being able to slowly climb. You take away all the progression from a player like this, the feeling of getting to gold 2, getting to gold 1, getting to platinum for the first time, getting to emerald for the first time. You take it all away when they just instantly get to emerald out of the gate, or just instantly placed into plat when they had been gold 3 before. And it makes it seem weird to them, like a competitive ladder. It doesn't make sense for a gold 3 player to ever just suddenly get placed into platinum, into like platinum 4. So a player who sees that happen is going to lose faith in the rank system and the ladder, because it's like, what's going on here? So, okay, we have this guy here. This guy happens to be EU West. We were looking at NA accounts, but it's the same thing across the board, right? Okay, so really good example of the stuff we've been talking about here. Great Echo and TF player, right? He's got most of his games played. It's like you recognize this by playing most of your games on these champions. He's got a 58%, 54% win rate. So he'd be sitting somewhere between there at like a 56% win rate and probably happily climbing, maybe on his way to Diamond, if he was just focused on playing these two champions. But he's playing 44 games of Shaco jungle, which is not even in mid lane, not even his main role with these two champions. And Talia, I assume, oh, it looks like some of it's mid, some of it's jungle. I was going to say I assume it's jungle, but he's winning 29% of his Talia games, regardless of if it's mid or jungle. If you're winning 29% of your games on 21 games played, you shouldn't be playing this. He played it again a day ago, again 3 days ago, lost a lot of games in a row on Talia a couple of days ago. Probably at this point, right, if you're even if you're testing a champion trying to bring it in the pool, if you start 6-15, it's not going well. It's going to take you so many games to learn how to win 50% of your games on the champion, especially for a player who's not even got 100 games on your most played champion. It's going to take you too long to get good on the champion. It's probably worth ditching. So no reason to be playing Shaco jungle, no reason to be playing Talia jungle, or even Talia mid, no reason to be playing a champion that you've invested 21 games in and are only winning 29% of your game. Now, I don't want to say this is the be-all, end-all, right? There are times when you can start playing a champion and have a very bad start to playing the champion. And it doesn't mean that you should just give up on the champion for the rest of your league career. But at a certain point, especially if you're a player who's sitting in Emerald 2, sitting in Emerald 3, wanting to climb to Diamond for the first time, you really want to hit Diamond, now is not the time when you've got two great champions going for you. You don't need a third in your 29% win rate Talia. Just get rid of it, right? Nico over here, kind of curious what role this is in, because this could be all over the place. This could be jungle, it could be mid, it could be support. Looks like he is playing it in his main role in mid. So that's good. It's not gone too disastrous. He's probably only 1 or 2 games back on the champion. But again, you've got 2 solid champions that you probably pick in most every one of your games without having to play this. So no reason for a player like you, if you're really wanting to be on the cusp of hitting Diamond, if you really want to hit Diamond for the first time, just play Echo and Twisted Fate. Don't worry about bringing new champions into the pool right now. Same thing with Lux. Kha'Zix, I assume, is in jungle. So even though there's been some success here, obviously just don't be playing jungle like with the Shaco and stuff like we talked about. Don't be playing these auto-filled games on support, etc. And, we're seeing the same thing here like I've covered at the end. Don't play your 12th through 31st unique pick. Limit your champion pool. For you as a player, it's very clear. I mean, maybe we could go back and pick up some other champions. No, it was just Twisted Fate doing bad on Shaco again. Just Twisted Fate, barely any games played on Shaco, so same thing. Just Twisted Fate, a little bit of Bard secondary. So look, for you, your only 2 champions that you've ever really found a lot of success with long-term and ranked are Echo and Twisted Fate. Keep playing those champions. 2 is enough, right, for you for now for mid lane. If you really want to hit Diamond, focus on playing those 2 champions. Drop everything else from your champion pool. Dodge when you get auto-filled. Dodge when you get a secondary role. And stop ever picking like all these random unique champions. As I said, maybe if you feel like, well, I really need an AD mid pick, because I want to have more flexibility with my picks for my team, maybe find an AD mid champion or something that you feel like you would be best at. Maybe it's Corki or something, have a little good start on Corki here, if you really feel like doing that. But I'd say wait until you get to Diamond and then do that, right? Because then you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to have a better foundation for picking up those champions, and you're going to get Diamond first. So you don't need to, I can one-trick Braum and get there. I don't need to have the wide pool of support champions in order to get there. Plenty of people one-trick a champion. You've got 2, and 2 different champions, right? Twisted Fate, a utility-based, kind of control mage champion. Echo, more of a, like, bursty melee assassin. So you're playing, ranged utility control mage type champion, roamer and Twisted Fate, and very different type of champion in Echo, more of an assassin. So I would say that you've already got 2 unique champions going well for you. Just stick to those. Drop the rest of the stuff. No more games autofill. No more games secondary role. No more games support. No more games jungle. Definitely no more Shaco and Talia. and worry about building your champion pool up when you're in Diamond Plus. You know, when you really care about having 3 or 4 or 5 different champions that you can play, if you even care then, right? For a lot of people, to be really honest with you, especially in solo queue, especially if you don't enjoy the other champions. If you enjoy them and want to play them some, fine. But especially if you don't enjoy the other champions, the only reason to ever build a big champion pool is if you want to get onto a team and you need to play more than 1 or 2 champions in order to like properly play for a team where you know people know you and you're going to get banned out, or you start to get to high elo and you're one tricking a champion. People are banning Braum against me much more frequently now in GM. You know, so those are reasons why it can be good to have some other champions to play, but not right now, right? If you're trying to hit Diamond for the first time, focus up, focus up. Okay, so cut all these unique champions out, cut out all the autofill, cut out the champions that you're not performing well with in mid that you're trying to bring into your pool. Worry about expanding your pool once you get to Diamond. Okay, Super Adrian, this is on NA, right? Yeah. This guy, same thing, gold, then shot up to Platinum 4, but very interestingly enough, compared to a lot of the other people, right, actually managed to not only hold on to their rank increase in Platinum 4, but actually climbed to Emerald 3 for the first time and has now gotten all the way up to Emerald 2. So they've actually managed to counter, you know, a lot of this negativity from having to suddenly go from being a gold player to playing against like Platinum and Diamond players. They've actually managed to do okay. Now, part of that may be that Adrian here has played 815 ranked games so far this split. So this guy is improving a lot because this is a really experienced player. This is a player who is like peak learning, like playing a ton of games to improve and to learn. So this is really good. Like if you want to get good, you have to play a lot of League. So that's important, right? Now, that being said, let's look at the champion pool. Okay, so we got Varus, you know, doing really well on Varus. Great stat line here on Varus. Like basically like 10 and 5, 55% win rate on nearly 300 games on Varus. Then unfortunately here, good KD on Ashe, not such a good win rate. And we would have to wonder about like why that is, because he seems like his KD is okay on Ashe. So why would he not be doing better on the champion? Because this is a large sample size of games. So you should expect, you know, this isn't really just unlucky if you're winning 46% of your games on 174 plates. Something's going wrong with the way that you're playing Ashe. 7.1 CS per minute is not that bad, right? It's only, you know, 0.3 CS per minute lower than the Varus. Obviously, he's getting less kills, but he also has a little bit less deaths, more assists, which of course we would expect more assists on Ashe. I wonder if compared to the average Ashe player, he is like getting less assists. It seems like a low amount of assists for an Ashe, but you know, that'd be an interesting case study. This may actually be a case where like coaching is worth it. It's not really worth it to coach a player like okay, let's take the last player for example. The guy's doing really well on Twisted Fate, doing really well on Echo. That guy can get to Diamond without coaching just by picking Twisted Fate and Echo every game. This guy, I mean, maybe if he just picked Varus every game, but realistically, this guy, it would be interesting to see why his Ashe is not winning more games, because it's kind of hard to tell by just looking at the op.gg. You'd have to dive into some games. What is he, are there some common mistakes that he's making? Is he not doing enough to towers? Is he not rotating to the right lanes? Is he not doing the right thing with his wave? Is he not enabling his support right? Or, you know, what is he doing in order to lose these games? Is he getting caught at key moments and throwing the game, even though his KD is not so bad? You know, what could be causing this like lower than expected win rate given his stat line and CS and stuff like that? Jinx doing pretty well on the Jinx. You know, we're starting to drop off a number of games played here, but still, you know, a lot of games played. On the Caitlyn, doing okay, but like not winning a lot of games. It's not too bad of a stat line. Like if we look here, he's only like 6 games back on Caitlyn. This is kind of normal, to be honest. I mean, depending on how much Caitlyn you played before, in your first 80 games or so, or 90 games on a champion, being only like, you know, 3, 4, 5 games back is really not that big of a deal. But you're putting a lot of games into learning new, you know, a lot of new champions, right? And I will say too, for AD carry, it's easier for AD carries to have a bigger pool of champions because they are very similar to each other. They're kind of all auto attack based. So generally speaking, you will see AD carries have the biggest pool of champions. They don't have to though, and they benefit from limiting their champion pool as well. But you do see big champion pools on AD carries a lot of time. Doing decently on Ezreal. And then not a lot of games. I mean, really good champion pool discipline here. I mean, actually, if you look at like the end, even with it being filled and playing Yasuo and stuff like that, they're basically even or so in this area, which is a lot better than most players. But then that's really interesting because that's right, definitely different than a lot of most players. Like certainly they did well on Yasuo, but they probably shouldn't be playing off role. This Renekton, Jax, Master Yi, Yone, and Yasuo games probably shouldn't be played in the first place. But you know, it's very few games compared to most people, so it's really not that bad. I mean, it happens to the best of us. I've done it apparently a lot worse than most of you guys now when I was doing it the first time. So not too bad champion pool discipline here. I think the champion pool discipline needs to be at the top, and I actually do think this is a case where coaching kind of makes sense because we really need to see what's happening with the Ashe here. Because if he was winning 55% of his games on Ashe like he was on Varus, the guy would be in Diamond, right? If he had played all of these games on Varus instead of Ashe, he would be in Diamond. But I don't necessarily think with like how decently he's doing in other aspects on Ashe, I don't think that like it's necessarily worth giving up on a champion that you've played just this split 174 games on, and I'm assuming the champion pool has some continuity between previous splits. No, it was mostly Varus, a lot of Jace and stuff. So this is kind of weird. But no, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say though with how many games you've put into Ashe that it'd be worth giving up on playing the champion, right? It's like if you enjoy the champion, he's playing a lot of utility. Ashe and Varus are kind of both utility AD carries. Be interesting to see how does he build Varus here. Actually, no Varus games in his recent match history. That's not good. That also makes me worry or wonder too that like, has he given up on Varus even though it's clearly his champion he's winning more with and like carrying himself with, because you know maybe things haven't gone so well on Varus recently in ranked, or because you know he feels like he needs to work on his champion pool or something. No, he's just playing on hit Varus, which is fine. Like that's basically good right now. Yeah. So it'd definitely be interesting to see because there might be something that this guy's consistently doing wrong in his Ashe games that would suddenly shoot him up to like a, you know, 50% win rate on Ashe or 55% win rate on Ashe, and then all of a sudden, right, him not being, because he's 2 divisions away, right? If he's not negative 14 games on Ashe, the guy is obviously 2 divisions up and just in Diamond. So I would say like for now, focus on just playing Varus. Maybe have Jinx as your secondary, right? Just be playing like Jinx and Varus because you've got positive win rates on them. Maybe Ezreal even as a third champion is doing pretty well, even though it's a lot less games played. It seems like it's working pretty well for him. Just play those champions, you know, like Varus mostly. You should be playing like 90% of your games on Varus and like 5% on Jinx and maybe 3% on Ezreal or something. Just do that, and maybe we'll get some coaching or all VOD review some of the Ashe and see what's going on with the Ashe here. Because there are cases like this. If you have a player who's hard stuck over a very large number of games, or they put a large number of games into a certain champion and they're still not coming out, and it's Ashe, right? It's like the champion that's I recommended even new players to play in AD carry because I think it's very basic, teaches a lot of good fundamentals. If you're still winning 46% of your games on Ashe after 174 games played, there's something wrong with the way that it's being played, right? And it's not the CS, it's not the KD, so it's something else. Maybe it's like the damage. Let's see here. But it can be little things that you're not going to tell from an op.gg, right? Damage is a little bit low, but you know it's a utility AD carry, but 21,000 damage is a little bit low for AD carry. It's not terrible, but it's a little bit low. I mean, you can see, for example, right, look at the difference between the damage del. Doing an extra 4,000 damage every game makes a big difference for an 80 carry player. Makes a big difference. So, you know, this damage gap here is a little bit of an issue, right? But it's not just that, right? There's some other stuff going on there. So that's interesting. Oh, so this is a guy who linked his account who's leveling up. So this guy's new. He's playing bot games. How do we even see what is going on here? Normal game. Uh-oh. This is not enough information. Has he only played like 4 actual normal games and the rest he's just playing bot games? I can't tell you anything about this guy. Well, good luck to you. Apparently there is a new player playing League though. So we'll see. Honestly, he's already level 23. He's just playing bots. Here's my recommendation to this guy. My recommendation is understand the pros and cons of what I'm about to tell you, but you would be better off playing normal games rather than playing bot games. You're stomping all of your bot games, right? Obviously, they're bot games. You're going 19-1 and 19 against the bots. You're going 6-0, right? Look at your KD. You're going 8-3 and 11 versus the bots. You're not getting anything more out of playing against bots anymore. You're just not. So what you need to do is play normal games versus other players. Now, that being said, you have to understand that on fresh accounts, what happens in your normal games will affect your ranked placement. So that's my disclaimer. That being said, I think you want them to affect your ranked placement because especially if you're a new player, you don't want to place much higher than you belong because while that sounds nice, if you place much higher than you belong, you will have to lose like we've seen with those other players who went up during the rank distribution shift. You will have to win, 48, 49% of your games for 500 games played in order to get your account back to the rank that it really should be at because Riot screwed up. And then if that happens to you, if you end up in that situation where you get placed too high, the game's going to become miserable and unplayable for you on your main account. And all the time you spent leveling is kind of going to be wasted because you're just wasting away, not able to climb, just trying to get to the appropriate starting point. Giving Riot more normal game win and losses and other data to kind of figure out where to place you is probably in your best interest. That being said, as a new player, you have to understand, right, the cons. You will end up placing lower if you go and play those normal games. You will place lower because you're going to do bad in those normal games. It's going to be your first time mostly playing against real people. You're probably going to have a tough time. So it's not, it's a trade-off, right? But you'd rather be placed at the rank that you should actually start out at so that you have a chance of winning your games when you're playing so that the game isn't miserable and you don't quit. And by playing those normal games, you're going to get a lot better practice and become a better player than by playing these bot games and continuing to stomp bot games. You're kind of wasting your time and not really improving by playing these bot games. So at the end of the day, whether you place in silver or gold or bronze doesn't really matter. What matters is how long is it going to take you to improve to get to, depending on what your goal is, but how long is it going to take you to improve and get to platinum or to emerald or to diamond? And if you're playing you're spending 100 hours as someone who's new to the game and doesn't even play it that much, if you spend 100 hours leveling your account just playing bot games and not really learning anything, then that would be a tremendous waste of time as opposed to spending 100 hours playing normal games versus all kinds of different range of players, Smurfers, people who are playing on Smurf accounts and leveling up, other people who are new, but you're going to gain a lot of experience playing from the hardest match that you can play in. And so I would recommend doing that instead, even if it hurts your ranked placement a little bit. Here's the other thing to not worry about so much too. Look at this. We looked, we can't really see a whole lot, but in the normal games he's played so far, he's 4-3. So not so bad, right? Maybe it's not even going to matter because if you go 50-50, you're probably going to end up in the same place you were going to be anyways. So maybe even higher if you're holding your own versus these people who are playing in normals on these. So maybe it's not even going to be that bad, or not even the case. Okay, last one. We've got Mil-Spec Leona here, who was a Platinum 4 player. Then the rank distribution shift happened and ended up in Emerald 2, so they went up a little bit. And then actually managed to go up in rank, right, all the way into Diamond 3 through some incredible improvement instead of falling down like a lot of people. So there are some good counter examples in here too. And then, unfortunately, though, like when I got to Diamond for the first time, they've been kind of hard stuck, 49% win rate. So they're negative like 11 games on 500 games or so played. And so let's take a look if this is a problem with champion pool or coaching, or probably both, right? When I say with coaching, I mean like a player who's stagnating at a 50% win rate on this many games played, regardless of if they, tighten up their champion pool, which will help them. They're probably needing to, look, the guy's obviously at his peak rank, and he's probably needing to make some massive improvements, and he's not seeing those right now. So what I would recommend to this player is like what I needed when I was at this rank: tighten up your champion pool. Don't give up on your main champion just because it's frustrating and it's hard and you're winning 49 or 50% of your games because you're stuck at your peak. Diamond 4 is a great achievement, right? And you did it during a time when a lot of people were actually going down after getting promoted to Emerald for the first time. So, just tighten up the champion pool, focus on figuring out what you can do on your main champions, on your main champion pool, right? What can you do to improve the way that you're playing? And you will find, right, things that you can be doing better, and you will get better, and you will keep climbing. But let's take a look at the champion pool and see what's going on with that, since that's the topic of this one. But this is another player that like might be worth coaching. Because they're obviously like hard stuck at a rank that a lot of people get hard stuck at and is very difficult. And they're also like a player who's obviously made a lot of improvement, has the capacity to continue to improve, I'm sure. So we can see that like 53% on Leona. It's doing pretty good on Leona. Negative 3 games on Nautilus, not the end of the world. Not great. Let's see actually like what are we working with before? Where's like Nautilus here? Yeah, like coming into the champion pool, Leona and Maokai doing pretty good, decently on Blitzcrank, a little bit tough on Lulu, but only a couple of games back. Pretty wide champion pool on this guy. He's kind of doing what we saw, with mine a couple of times, which is that, you can play kind of 10 champions, 20 games played, roughly a 50% win rate. Some of them you're a little bit negative on. Maybe they're new or coming into the champion pool, or you just had a rough 20 games on them. Some of them more positive, 64%, 64%, 60%, but a couple of main champions that are really kind of your solid champions. Again, like a lot of these people, better than when I was playing, pretty decent limit on the number of unique champions. Still probably 30 is way too many. Still probably shouldn't be playing these Jarvan games and Nocturne and Fiddlesticks games and stuff like that, although doing pretty decently. I mean, 5-1 on Vi and stuff like that. Actually, this guy had a hell of a split on jungle at 5-1 and 3-2 and stuff like that on Fiddlesticks and on Vi, 3-1 on Nocturne. But anyways, you still shouldn't be doing it because you want to spend the time improving at support, because that's what's going to push your peak up, not getting slightly better at being autofilled jungle. This guy's better at jungle than he is support. But anyways, 80, he's got 62% here, 8-5 on Nocturne as well. I don't know. I did say it though, right? Coming up in the next patch, if you can play your secondary role basically just as well as you can play your main role, or you can play an autofilled role as well as your main role, or like close, you're going to play against an autofilled player or secondary role player on the other team most of the time. And so if that's the case, if you can play jungle at a 60% win rate, or like same win rate as your main account, let's say if you had actually played as many games as Leona, your win rate would revert to the mean. But regardless, it looks like he's able to play jungle at the same as his main. So maybe it's fine for this guy in particular to continue to play jungle secondary. Maybe limit your jungle champion pool in the same way you should limit your support champion pool. Maybe pick, 2 of your best junglers in your opinion, and stick to those two champions when you get filled jungle, instead of playing like a bunch of different ones. But that can be an advantage for you, actually, if you can really play those two roles. So again, like Nautilus here, it's a little bit bad, but not too bad. Let's see if I look at the front. It's a little bit easier. So we got like 193 games played on Leona, 53% win rate. Great. We're like climbing on Leona. It's probably not enough that we would get all the way to like Masters, because we are sitting at the bottom of Diamond. There is a bit of a big skill gap between Masters and Diamond. So I don't think that you could just instantly only pick Leona. Like, let's say that you just completely one-tricked Leona. I don't think you would get to Masters even doing that. 53% win rate, probably you'll fizzle out to about a 50% win rate and get stuck in like D2 or something like that, even if you were to fully commit to just only ever picking Leona. And maybe you don't even want to do that, because you do want to maintain a decent champion pool, and you're obviously somebody who is able to play a bunch of other support champions at kind of a decent win rate. And it's hard to say that like the autofill is the problem or something like that, playing those autofill games, because he's actually doing pretty well on his secondary role in jungle. Probably a bit too many unique champions here, not doing so well like we've seen on all the accounts, you know, on these kind of end picks here, kind of one-off, you know, first timing type picks. But you know, big drop off here to Nautilus, and then again we're a little bit behind on Nautilus here, but it's fine. It's kind of bringing it into the champion pool. It's a good champion to have. It's fine. Good champion pool for the meta, which is kind of starting to matter at this rank, but not too much. Don't worry about it too much, because you know, I think people think, especially in like Emerald and Diamond, that meta matters more than it does, because they hear that meta matters the higher rank you go. But how much does it matter in like Emerald or Diamond, where like you're definitely high enough up you would think it would matter, but it really doesn't. Any player can, well, not any player, but any person, well, okay, any person who's good at maining a champion, like a good main of that champion, can get to even probably Masters Plus. Honestly, I even want to say Challenger Plus. But at the very minimum, there is always at any given time one person who's a complete one trick of one champion who's at least D2 or above. So just because a champion is not in the meta or not as good as Leona, but still decent in the meta, does not mean that you're going to get stuck in D4 or Emerald or even Platinum or something like that because of the meta. So don't worry about the meta too much. Where the meta starts to matter is like, okay, you're one tricking Braum in Grandmaster. It's a bad meta for Braum. You might demote to Masters because of it, right? Like you might only be able to win 51% of your games. It might be a really slow grind. You might not make any progress that split because of the meta. You might want to consider picking up another champion, especially if you're a player like me who believes that they have other champions from past experience that they could rely on and go to in order to round out their champion pool. So that's just kind of how it is. Yeah, so this player is a little bit tough, right? Because I don't think they have a good enough win rate on any champion to just switch to X, Y, and Z, or just make a champion pool out of X, Y, and Z, and you're going to get Masters, right? You got a 53% win rate on Leona. That's going to fizzle out, to 50%, and you're going to get stuck before you hit Masters. You're going to need to actually improve at the champion. Same thing with like Nautilus. You're bringing it into the champion pool, but you're not even winning 50% of your games yet, but you're close. Probably recently you're getting there. Maokai, decent, but like not, same thing as Leona, even less games played, less experience, not going to get to Masters with it. Lulu, it's promising because of the 58% win rate, but it's probably not going to get you to Master. You probably, as a Leona Nautilus player, don't even want to be playing or maining Lulu anyways. But this 58% win rate is a little bit fake because it's a small sample size of 19 games played. If you had like 100 games played on Lulu, it would be closer to 50%. So this is a player who, yes, you could tighten up your champion pool discipline and say like, okay, I'm just going to play Nautilus, Leona, Maokai, Lulu, and that's my champion pool. And we can kind of cut out the rest of this nonsense, especially in the middle where we're like losing more games than we're winning by trying to play Ashe, by trying to play Xerath, by playing these kind of one-off champions and stuff like that. Maybe we should stop doing that. And that'll help us a little bit But even with doing that and then sticking to those main couple of champions, you know, maybe you go from a 49% win rate to a 50 or 51% win rate, but it's not enough to push you to Masters. Maybe you get to D2, or like you get, you know, if you play enough games, you'll like win streak to D2, but then you're not going to stay there forever or something like that. But it's not going to push you to Masters. So what do? It's probably a scenario where you need to like take a look at the gameplay and improve stuff. I've said it before, one of the biggest things that helped me was my ping going down, but that's not, you know, it's not going to change unless you just happen to be somewhere. But if you really take the game seriously, if you really want to get Challenger or go pro or something like that, you know, consider going to college where the ping's better. You know, or getting fiber if you can, right? If fiber is available, if it's coming to your town, that will greatly reduce your ping. That's another easy way to do that. You know, the second thing, right, and more practical, is the ability usage, right? Like, try to make sure that you're using your abilities, not just spamming them like it's IRF or throwing all your abilities immediately out at once, but trying to think about the best case scenario usage for your abilities and using your abilities at the most optimal times rather than just instantly throwing them out there. That was a big one for me, especially on Braum. Maybe not as applicable to like a Leona or Nautilus though. I think actually something that might help with a player like this who's dying a lot, you know, 7 times a game on Leona, 8 times a game on Nautilus, is you need to manage to get the same number of assists while dying a lot less frequently. You know, obviously it's a little bit apples to oranges. We're not exactly the same player or the same champion, but I'm getting 15.3 assists a game in a much harder rank, right? Like up in Masters GM, I'm getting 15.3 assists a game on 5.4 deaths. And you're getting 7.1 deaths and like 1 or 2 less assists. Now, again, not exactly the same champion. I mean, what do we got on Leona here? I mean, Leona I've barely, you know, not played that many games on. So obviously my deaths have gone up a little bit, but look at this, right? On Leona, I'm getting, in these games I've been playing in Masters /GM, again, it's only 4 games, so take it with a grain of salt, right? My stats would normalize a little bit more closer to your stats, but 2 less deaths a game, 2 more assists a game. That's the difference between being a 53% win rate Leona and being a 56, 57% win rate Leona in D4 and being able to climb to Masters for the first time. Think about what are the coin flip plays, like the thin plays that you're going for that aren't the best plays that you're taking. Take the worst 10% of plays that you're going for and stop going for those plays. If you do that, then you're going to find yourself dying less. I get that Leona's going to die a lot. It's a, you know, champion that goes in. That's why comparing Braum to Leona is a little bit like apples to oranges, but we looked at like my Leona. I wish there were more games here. Maybe we could find another Leona player at that rank. If we even include the flex queue games or whatever, you know, it gets a little bit closer because there are more games played. The deaths go up a little bit, but still like a death, you know, like 1.3, 1.4 less deaths than him, still 1 more assists than him. So find your way to get 2 extra assists a game while also dying 2 times less a game. And probably what it's going to be is getting more consistently further ahead by mitigating the deaths that you're going to have when you're going in at a bad time. And so, you know, it's part of the learning process. You're going to go in. Sometimes it's not going to work so well. Sometimes the jungler's going to show up. Sometimes it's just going to get executed poorly by you or your teammates, and it's not going to work. Part of limit testing and doing that is that that's going to happen, especially on an engaged support where you're having to make those decisions to engage like that yourself. But look at like how he's doing recently, right? In his recent games on Leona, we can even just look at Leona here, but I see he's 8-2 recently on Leona. Okay, so like look at this, for example, right? So his last 20 games on Leona, he's actually doing it already. He's averaging 1 less death a game on Leona. Oh, well, sort of. He's averaging 1 less death a game on Leona, but he's also averaging 1 less assist a game. Now, that's just these 20. It doesn't necessarily mean something. But what I'm saying is that if you can manage to cut out some of those bad plays that you're going for, those worst plays that you're going for every game that are resulting in you averaging 7 deaths, if you get down to 5 or 6 deaths a game on Leona, you're going to be alive for longer. instead of dead during those times, when you can find other plays and get assists during those times, you're going to be further ahead of their team and be able to get more assists because your team is more consistently ahead of the other team. And so by not dying, an extra 2 times a game, sorry, that's my client again, you're going to, by not dying an extra 2 times a game, you're probably going to get those extra 2 assists by just being consistently more ahead of the enemy team and being alive and on the map longer. And so you're going to do that, and now all of a sudden you're going to have 56% instead. Now, the coaching, could be good in this case scenario too, because obviously it's players put a lot of games in, is able to improve, has been quite successful in climbing, but is kind of stuck right now at a high peak, but hard rank to make improvement at and climb. So we'll see what happens. That's kind of it. So again, to recap, when you're building a champion pool, when you're thinking about what champions you're picking for the first time, you've got to think about the different classes there are in the game to save yourself some time. What role, what archetype of champion or class of champion do you think fits well with you? And save yourself as much time as possible by watching some people play a little bit of the champion, seeing if it seems fun to you, learning what the different classes of champions are in the game and what their strengths and weaknesses are and when they're strong in the game and when they're weak in the game. Do you enjoy trading? Do you enjoy CSing? Do you enjoy wave clear and farming? Do you enjoy like a high impact AoE team fight ultimate? Do you want to be winning team fights, or do you want to be playing a split pusher? Do you want to have utility and CC, or you want to do a bunch of damage and be a carry? What is your play style? And find a champion that best meshes with your play style through watching people play, watching some guides, watching the champion spotlights, learning a little bit about the champions. Even if you don't end up playing the champion, you'll learn a lot about the game from doing that as a newish player. Finds a couple of champions. It doesn't have to be a lot, just a couple of champions that you really enjoy playing, that fit the play style that you enjoy playing. Then you start playing the game, right? You start playing those champions. You stick to those couple of champions. Like, I would really recommend try to stick to 2-3 champions, right? If you're that, Echo TF player like we saw, it doesn't have to be 3 champions. It can be 2. If you really want to, it can be 1. Like, I'm mostly sticking to 1 right now. That works totally fine, especially in lower ranks. You're going to be able to play 1 champion all the way to Masters if you really want to. People aren't going to know you and personally ban you out even in like D2 and D3. It's not going to happen. Plenty of people, again, as I said, there is a one-trick pony on every single champion up to Masters, who's in like Masters Plus, on every single champion. So you pick your couple of champions. That's your main champion pool. Those are the only champions that you ever pick in ranked, except if you decide that you want to add a new champion to your champion pool. But obviously, you're going to see how it goes first. Preferably with those champions that you're picking, especially if you're a newer player, do not pick highly complicated, like very difficult, very complicated mechanical champions. Pick simple, easy to play champions, stuff like tanks, basic auto attackers, basic control mages, stuff like that. Don't get too fancy with it, but pick something that you enjoy playing, right? But there are some champions that can really be a trap because, you might enjoy playing it, but it's the most complicated champion in the game, or one of the most complicated. And so it's a really tough spot to be in as a new player, but you got to balance that and figure that out. So you've got your couple of champions. The only other champions you're going to pick in ranked, besides that initial champion pool, are going to be champions you're trying to test and bring into your champion pool. These are champions you're going to have watched the champion spotlight, you're going to have watched a guide, and you're going to feel like that champion might be very fun for you to play, might be a new main, might be something that you really want to add to your champion pool as a third champion if you only have 2 champions, or as a second champion if you only have 1, etc. But again, not pushing your champion pool to be too large. Or maybe one of your champions in your champion pool is just like no longer fun for you, or you're just not having any success on it after a lot of games, and so you want to not play it anymore because you don't think it's good for your ability to climb. Those are situations you're looking to add to your champion pool, or replace things or rotate things out of your champion pool. You test a champion. So you've watched a champion spotlight, a guide, you kind of get an idea. Maybe you play a few normal games, maybe you play a few games on a Smurf. Then you decide not just that I'm going to randomly pick this champion one game as a first time in ranked, but I'm going to play 5, 10, maybe even 20 games, depending on how it starts out and how it's going. I'm going to play like 20 games on this champion and see how it goes. You play 20 games on the champion, even in 20 games, sometimes it can be bad. Don't give up on the champion necessarily. If you really enjoy playing it, you're getting better at playing it just because you lost 1 or 2 or even 3 more games than you won in 20 games. But if it's going really terrible, if you start out, you're 0 and 10, you're 2 and 10, 2 and 11, 2 and 12, maybe that's just a sample size problem, but it's not looking good for your new champion, right? You see how it goes. If you're making slow improvement, if you feel like you're getting better at the champion, if you feel like the champion's working for you and is good, fits with your play style, and you enjoy playing it, keep playing it more. Add it to the champion pool. But if you start playing a champion really more than 100 games and you're still like not even getting to 50% win rate on the champion, probably it's not working. Now, you wouldn't necessarily want to abandon a champion you've put 100 games of practice into, but if it's really low, if it's 46%, let's say, or even lower than that, you're probably going to want to have to abandon the champion. Maybe it was too difficult of a champion or too dissimilar from your play style or your main champion or something like that, but it's just not working. Those are the champions that you're going to be playing. As a result, if you've got like 3 champions in your main champ pool, and over the course of the split you try like 10 champions or something like that, that's only like 13 unique champions played in ranked. You should dodge the game where you're auto-filled or secondary role or something like that, unless you can play your secondary role at the same level as your main. Most people who think that they can't, though, so be careful about that. And that's starting next patch would be worth doing that, because they're going to try to guarantee a secondary role player or an auto-filled player on the other team. So if you're better than the average secondary role or auto-filled player at your secondary role at your rank, then you will actually win more on your secondary role as a result of that, and it can be worth playing those games out now moving forward into the future. But if you're like significantly worse at your second role, like I am, for example, I'm not anywhere near being able to play like ADC or jungle or something at a GM level. I would get smoked probably. So probably not worth doing that for me. Be cautious with that, because people are going to assume that they can play their secondary role better than they can, and you don't have a lot of data to really know because you don't play your secondary role that much. So you're going to end up with like 13 unique champions played, your 3 or so from your main champion pool, and maybe 10 or so champions you're trying to work into your main champion pool over the course of a split that you ended up trying a little bit. And finally, maybe if you don't do things right and you play a few autofill games out, maybe you're going to have 15, 16 unique champions played, because you're going to have a couple of games on some one-off champions that you happen to make the mistake of not dodging and playing those games out when you were filled. So, you're going to do that to increase your champion pool. We learned as a side note, right, that obviously there was that rank distribution shift. So we kind of talked about that, covered that rank distribution shift, but we see some players doing well through it, and we see some players going back down after it. And I do feel bad for players who kind of, rather than having that consistent climb that we saw that I went through when I was learning the game, players had this just sudden jump from like silver to plat, or from like gold to emerald or something like that. And I think that takes a lot of the fun of slowly climbing and making that progress over time. It takes a lot of that fun and that progress away. And then it's really bad if then the person gets stuck winning 49, 50% of their games for their next 1,000 games. And there's no progress for them to make anymore, because Riot's kind of automatically shifted them up the 2 ranks they would have progressed through over those 1,000 games. And so instead they just get stuck for 1,000 games. And, 1,000 games hard stuck is a fate I would not wish upon my worst enemy. And so a lot of those players are going to quit the game. So I think Riot's done a poor job of rebalancing the rank distribution in a way that's probably causing players to quit, or feel like them randomly shooting up in ranked was unfair, and that the rank system's not fair because of it, or them randomly shooting back down in rank, not randomly, but them shooting back down in rank because they're not able to hold their own in emerald anymore as a gold player, versus players like this who are in platinum, or who were even diamond players before or on their way to diamond. Obviously this is a bit of an issue. And Riot should stop tampering with things like that. But I hope that you guys enjoyed and learned something. It's been an absolutely long one. The Discord link will be in the description again if you want to see maybe your op.gg in a future video, or, you know, we'll maybe do some coaching in cases where it makes sense to do something like that. Hope that you guys enjoyed. Good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.